new Hashira rises. What if Naruto mastered sun breathing?
Hello everyone, welcome to What If Naruto Was the Sun-Breathing Hashira and Demon Slayer movie. Before we start, please go support Dragneel Slayer for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistaken character's gender, but of course Naruto is a male. When a pillar falls in battle, it is replaced by another. But this takes too long, and the situation demands that the demon hunters have all their pillars. Marked since childhood, haunted by the dead and harassed by his sins, Uzumaki Naruto decides to change his destiny and his life with a single choice, with a single change of route that leads him to change the lives of many people. He cannot communicate with words, but he can with actions. Chapter 1. An Eternal Dream. A perfect flawless season. The Infinite Dream Train. Under Musen's orders, everyone on that train was placed in a dream that showed them what they most longed for, what they most desired at that moment, at that instant. A family. All its members would be in that dream. A wife. It would be a wish granted, and the person would be with their desired partner. The dreams would be complete and fulfilling while death loomed over all the passengers. Unfortunately for the plans of Enmu, the demon in charge of the train, the hunters on board managed to escape their desired dreams and worked hard to end the infinite train's eternal dream. But everything changed in a single second. Upper Moon 3 made its appearance. Akaza of the 12 demon moons stood before the flame pillar. Rengoku Kaijuro, fully intending to test his power. Akaza loved power, to be the best within himself, within his qualities. And meeting Rengoku was one of his cherished desires, as well as facing him, bringing him to death by his own hand. That was how they fought. The flame pillar. The Upper Moon 3. Rengoku and Akaza fought hand to hand, leaving the area completely destroyed, filled with fire and debris. Just when Rengoku seemed to have the upper hand, about to cut off his head, he was overpowered in just a few seconds, impaled on Akaza's arm through his chest, collapsing the pillar as the demon pulled his arm back with a disappointed look. Why did Rengoku resist becoming a demon? Why reject the strength that had elevated him above others? He always desired power, the strength that would set him above everyone else. What was wrong with that in Rengoku's eyes? Akaza looked down at Rengoku. He saw him crying, tears streaming down his cheeks as his mouth spat out blood. To the side, the sword lay inert, lifeless, and completely useless and harmless. And even if I used it, it wouldn't cut his skin. You should have agreed. He closed the fingers of his right hand into a fist. Akaza watched as Rengoku remained on his knees, his right eye closed by the blood. I will end your life now. It's not personal. Akaza let out a breath. Letting you live isn't something I'm going to do. Akaza shot out his arm. He shot straight ahead, intending to hit the chest. Rengoku-san. There was no time to act. No one with less training than a pillar could close that gap. No one with speed greater than that of a human could possibly defend the flame pillar. Akaza hissed in pain and jumped back. He stared at his limb as an immense wall of flame emerged between him and Rengoku. Slowly, the skin regenerated and his blackened limb returned to its original form. Was it you? But while he had expected to see Rengoku taking the sword in a desperate move, he opened his eyes when another figure stood between him and Rengoku, holding a sword in front of his face with a thin, red-edged blade fully displayed. You're not much of a talker. Akaza looked at Rengoku and then moved his gaze to the new man. Like Rengoku, the man had golden blonde hair, forming a leonine mane that framed his sharp face. Blue eyes stared at him like daggers of eyes, and fine lines on the hunter's cheeks gave him a completely predatory look. But it doesn't matter. Akaza reacted. Through his years of martial training, Upper Moon 3 raised both arms. The blade struck his limbs, and he felt his skin hiss at the Nichiren's touch, as if fire were burning his limbs. When he reacted, the hunter was upon him. It surpassed his reflexes. He watched as the human's right hand came toward his face, and in a second, he saw himself lying backward until his back slammed into an ancient oak tree. He didn't feel the pain and didn't even pay attention to the splinters embedded in his skin. His eyes shifted to watch the human's movement. I'll take this seriously, then. Akaza took a deep breath and smiled. He might be pleasantly surprised with that second confrontation. He had to admit it was a pretty good idea to come see how Enmu set all that up. Akaza shifted his body to the right, missing the blade by inches. He looked at it pointedly and brought both arms down, striking the blade with his elbows and driving the weapon into the ground. Without the sword, the hunter couldn't. The hunter surprised Akaza. The man placed his right hand on the handle of his speared sword and, while lying face down, shot his leg toward the demon's face. Overpowered, Akaza blocked the leg with his hand but was pushed back a few meters. I'd say a human can't excite me, Akaza smiled. The hunter fell to his feet, removing the scarf from around his neck. But this really excites me. Blood stained Upper Moon 3's hand. With strength overwhelming even for a human, the hunter shattered Akaza's hand with that overhead kick in a complicated position, almost as if he were a dancer. "Aren't you going to say something?" Even Rengoku was more talkative. The man wrapped his fingers around the sword's handle. He slowly closed his hand around it, feeling the leather yield under his pressure. At the same time, using his left hand, he pulled the maroon scarf down a little further, revealing his neck. A jagged mark like a saw blade traced a perfect line across that part of his body. Akaza understood it in seconds. "You're mute, aren't you?" The hunter rushed forward. Akaza reacted by rearing back. The Nichiren blade slashed across the distance in a direct thrust. Akaza swung his arms and deflected the blade, leaving a gap in his enemy's defense that allowed him to strike the man's chest. Now. Luna's superior Tress reacted to his instincts, his experience, and his time as a fighter. He took advantage of the gap in his opponent's defense and attacked with his blood-stained fist. His arm vibrated as his fist collided with the metal. Another sword. A second blade took its place in the hunter's left hand. This one revealed a slightly curved, wide, and serrated blade, resembling a scimitar. The hunter moved his hand and thrust his second sword into Akaza's arm, forcing the demon's body to move to the side. Taking advantage of that moment, he grabbed the handle of his second blade and swung it at the demon's shoulder. "You're good." Blood trickled from Akaza's left side. Drop by drop, the crimson blood hit the damp early morning grass. The serrated blade embedded itself in his body, slicing through muscle and skin, all the flesh. "Very good," his skin hissed as he withdrew the sword from his shoulder, letting it fall to the ground. "Superior reflexes and strength. Are you even human? Are you a pillar?" But Akaza didn't receive a response. Nor did he expect one. Being a demon, he prepared to continue that direct confrontation. He regained his calm and cool mind and accepted the hunter's attack. Left. Right. Right again. Akaza stepped back, allowing the hunter to pursue him, harass him. The swordsman followed this plan of the Upper Moon 3, as if he were in control of the situation. But it wasn't like that, and Akaza realized it too late. Crackling fire surrounded both blades. Before Akaza's eyes, the hunter was completely engulfed in flames for a few seconds until the fire was sent toward him, completely engulfing him. "You." Akaza hissed. The fire licked at his skin, burning his flesh. His regeneration was active, completely erasing any burns, any wounds. However, the fire was penetrating his skin, burning him internally. "It's time to eliminate you." The demon shifted his legs and moved his arms. Total destruction. Void style. Akaza swung his arms. The air in front of him twisted and a series of air blasts were launched at the demon hunter, who planted his feet on the ground. Before the demon turned martial artist's eyes, the mute man moved the weapon in front of him, generating a perfect circle of flames. "This." A small murmur. An animal's growl. Akaza understood that word as the only thing the human could say without vocal cords, as if he were limited. The wind waves generated by the movement of the third upper moon vanished before the mute hunter's flaming ring. He stabbed his sword into the ground after the movement. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs with air. He's not breathing like a normal person. Akaza understood that he wasn't an ordinary hunter. Normally, each movement could consist of a complete sentence, but that human had only used a single command to generate those flames. A command linked to breathing, as if he had only held it once or exhaled it once. That's what his eyes captured when he saw how the blonde man breathed and his chest moved accordingly. "No one has stopped my movement before. Not anyone alive, at least. And you were the first. Not even the flame pillar has done it. He is now." Akaza's eyes widened. Where was that human he killed on the train? Where was the flame pillar? "You moved him?" Akaza frowned, then smiled. "You took some time to save that man, didn't you? Even with that beastly appearance, you took some time to save a comrade. That ignites my fighting spirit." His blood was boiling. His spirit was fired up. Akaza dropped his arms to his sides and leaned his torso slightly forward, all the while displaying the savage grin of a beast about to pounce on its prey. The man took a single step. Golden hair stirred in the wind as the upper moon moved. Akaza moved forward, thrusting his arm out in a lunge, clearly intending to pierce the hunter's chest. Surprisingly, his hand collided with the hunter's Nichiren sword, creating a metallic clang. The demon leaped backward, leaving a bloody trail. Its limb was sliced from its body in a swift, direct movement that his expert body couldn't evade. Not even his trained and enhanced eyes could follow the movement of the hunter's second Nichiren sword, which ended up slicing through his arm with a flawless cut. The hunter walked slowly, crunching the grass beneath his feet. The scarf covered the lower part of his face, but his cold eyes remained fixed on the demon. "Shit." Akaza growled as the limb regenerated, spurting a spray of blood onto the grass. "Are you human? Are you a demon? Or are you something else?" There was no response from the human. He continued walking, showing his leaves to the tattooed demon's yellow eyes. You're mute. Who made that cut on your neck? Why are you still alive after a wound like that? It doesn't matter if you don't respond. You're not human. Left sword. Right sword. Right arm. Left arm. Hunter and demon countered each other's movements. One used his swords, while the other showed off the fluid movements his body could perform thanks to years of training to achieve such perfection in his martial art. NGH. With another clash and deflection, Akaza finally understood something about that silent hunter. He wasn't someone with feelings or scruples. He wasn't a human who left his actions to something as banal and unnecessary as human feelings. That hunter was intent on killing him, even at the cost of his life, and it was something he would do no matter how hard he tried to stop him. The demon skidded across the ground, feeling the grass brushing the soles of his feet. The hunter lowered both arms, revealing the two blades to his enemy. The dark steel of those swords, the Nichiren, faintly reflected the faint moonlight as it descended in the sky, turning the blade silver. Slowly, the man moved his right arm. Just as slowly, his right sword began to move, forming a slight line from the ground to the sky. The tip pointed toward the night sky, and the sword stood completely upright. What are you going to? Akaza opened his eyes. Like an eruption, fire surrounded the sword's blade completely, obliterating the silver steel from view. The demon's arms fell. Akaza shifted his weight to his lower body. He shifted his right leg back and retracted his right arm while simultaneously stretching out his left. I'll have to break those swords. A gap in your defense. My expert eyes have spotted it. It's now. He felt it. Akaza's body froze in place. A tremendous instinct filled the place. A predator towered over him, enormous and powerful. So. Akaza felt the fire. The man wrapped his right sword around the handle and plunged his left one into the air. Flexing his legs, he launched himself toward the upper moon. In slow motion, he slashed through the air, generating a hissing sound that accompanied the movement. I was about to cut the demon's throat. A millisecond. As the hunter was about to slice his prey's neck, Akaza nearly pierced his enemy's stomach. It was only for a second. When he sensed the upper moon's intentions, the hunter changed the trajectory of his slash and in that same instant sliced through the demon's right hand, severing the limb without a blink, leaving Akaza completely immobile. I should say I'm surprised, and I am. Grotesque sounds came from the severed limb. Akaza kept his gaze on his hand lying in the grass, staining the spot with his blood. Rengoku. I thought I would kill him, and yet I have come across you, a mute man from whom I can glean no information. Droplets crushed the small leaves of the wild plants. A new hand took its place where the old one had been. I must point out that this is not something I planned, that I had in mind. I was not even aware of your existence until this moment. Legs apart. Shoulders squared with the lower limbs. Hands wrapped around the sword handle. The man remained silent, staring at Akaza. I know you won't say anything, you can't say anything. Akaza flexed the fingers of his new hand. He felt no difference. It was as if he'd never lost it. But I'd still like to know the name of the man who managed to cut me. Yellow eyes stared at the hunter. The man returned the gaze without fear. He looked at the kanji that indicated his rank among Muzen's most loyal demons. Upper Moon 3. But you won't answer me. Taking that silence as his answer, Akaza sighed. It doesn't matter. We will meet again in the future, Flame Boy. Perhaps you are Rengoku's brother or apprentice. Your use of fire is what gives you away, I suppose. The demon looked at Rengoku's prone body. Around him were some medics from the Extermination Corps. I don't know how you got here so quickly, boy. He looked back at the mute man. Will you let me escape? Or will you try to kill me? There was no response. Silence accompanied Upper Moon 3's last words as the moon disappeared behind the mountains. Akaza twisted his lips into a brief smile and began to back away. We'll see each other again, Red Leaf. Chapter 2. The Demon Extermination Corps was tasked, completely anonymously, with murdering the demons living in Japan, those followers of Muzen who hunted humans as their prey and devoured them as if they were nothing more than food. They were natural enemies. Demons hunted humans, and the demon hunters hunted them down until they brought them to a completely fitting end by slicing off their heads, separating them from their bodies, and ending their miserable lives. Once a year, a test is held that allows young men to access their position as hunters. This exam is prepared by the Demon Slaying Corps, and only those with training in one of the breaths can pass. Afterward, they receive a piece of Nichiren iron that shapes the hunter's blades, the weapon they will use to hunt the demons that plague Japan cities. Just as demons have moons, hunters have pillars, powerful humans who have surpassed the limits of a human being and take on the role of leaders when necessary, having a power comparable to a demon moon that allows them to fight demons alone for a certain time because, although they are powerful, they are still human. The incident on the Infinite Dream train left several people injured, with 3 young hunters returning to the hospital at the Butterfly Mansion under the care of doctors. But they are not the only hunters cared for by Shinobu and her companions. Having stopped the bleeding, the Flame Pillar was saved from certain death by another of his companions, the latter of whom moved Rengoku and stopped the bleeding using bandages, all while fighting hand to hand against the demon that derailed the train and nearly killed the pillar, leaving him on the verge of death. The doctors cared for Pilar and did everything they could to keep him alive, something they miraculously achieved. If the other hunter hadn't arrived when he did, Pilar wouldn't have survived the confrontation and wouldn't be among the living today. The hunter in charge of rescuing the 3 Rengoku students and the pillar itself was summoned by the leader of the Demon Extermination Corps inside his mansion, something he usually did only with the pillars, so a hunter below this rank was strangely summoned by the leader of the group. "Ah, Naruto-kun," the hunter looked directly at the man who had called him by name. He had shoulder-length dark hair, dull eyes, and the upper half of his face showed a pinkish tint. "It's good to know you didn't receive any injuries during the encounter. Are your swords okay?" Naruto removed his traveling cloak and displayed his katana and broader blade to the man in front of him, showing that neither of his swords had suffered any damage during the confrontation with Upper Moon 3, although she tried to break the steel of his weapons with her fists, and Naruto was almost certain that she would succeed. "I see you take great care of those swords, Naruto-kun." Kagaya Yabayashiki was the 97th leader of the Demon Slaying Corps. Having been cursed in his youth, Kagaya would readily bare his skin, showing his subordinates just how much they could endure in a confrontation with a demon. Sometimes I forget you can't talk, my apologies," Kagaya pointed to the cushion in front of him. Naruto placed both swords on the floor and took the spot his boss pointed out, crossing one leg over the other and assuming the lotus pose. "First, I must thank you for saving the lives of the 3 boys, the people on the train, and Rengoku-san himself, who is currently alive thanks to your arrival. Really, thank you very much." Slightly, Naruto bowed his head in acceptance of Kagaya's words. "But I have some news. Because of the sword that was stuck into Rengoku, his right leg is completely paralyzed and he won't be able to move it. According to the doctors, it's almost impossible for him to regain mobility in that part of his body. I'm afraid he won't be able to continue being a hunter." Hunters face death daily. Using their breaths and their Nichiren, they bravely confront the demons in service to Muzan, willing to give their lives. It's the same case, perhaps even more so, for the pillars. Returning from the battle against Akaza with only the loss of use in one leg, but alive, was a bitter victory, but a victory nonetheless. Kagaya knew the situation would be unsettling for Rengoku. At barely 20 years old, the pillar would have to make way for another hunter to take his place in the organization and take over everything Rengoku had been doing before, perhaps even becoming the light of the Demon Slaying Corps. It's truly a shame. Rengoku's father and brother have been notified of his situation. When he wakes up, he will be informed, just like his family. That news would shatter Rengoku. The man's energy and optimism would be completely crushed by reality. A cold reality that Akaza brought to the hunters present at the train incident, something that marked them for life. Such events either forged the best hunters or destroyed them for the rest of their lives. Wagging his finger, Naruto pointed at himself. Kagaya understood the young hunter's question. "I know you're wondering what you have to do with this. Now I'll get to it." Without speech, Naruto found it difficult to communicate with his companions or anyone he came across. He usually used a piece of paper and a pen or chalk, but he began to use hand signals in certain situations to express his doubts. "You have directly confronted an upper moon, specifically the 3rd, according to the reports. That's a feat no other hunter below Pilar has been able to achieve." Kagaya spoke honestly. The pillars were a reflection of Muzan's demon moons, his human counterpart, and they were among the few hunters who could face one of the strongest demons and still be alive for the next day. That a lesser hunter had managed to do so was an achievement worth noting and celebrating. Thanks to that hunter, many others had survived the incident. "I'm straying a bit from the main topic of why I brought you here, Naruto-kun," Kagaya gave an apologetic smile at the hunter's blink. "The rest of the pillars wish to meet you, though I know you've known one of them for some time," Naruto responded with a more noticeable nod. "In Kaijiro Rengoku's absence, I wish you to be the new pillar to replace him. Time is of the essence, and a new pillar may take a while to appear if you do not accept this position." Selecting a pillar was as simple as knowing the hunter's exploits. For a hunter to be ranked among the 9 pillars, they had to have successfully killed a total of 50 demons or killed a member of the demon moons who served Muzan, something that would undoubtedly be a major breakthrough in the fight against demons. Kagaya knew that Naruto hadn't killed a moon demon, but the leader thought it was just as good to have had a confrontation with one as to have killed it. "According to the records, your position is Kino within the Demon Slaying Corps, correct?" Naruto gave a slight nod at the question. "You weren't chosen by any pillar to be their Tsuguko, pillar successor, so you can take Rengoku's position if you so wish." Naruto's affinity with fire gave him the opportunity to be the next generation's flame pillar, Rengoku's full replacement in the organization. The hunter took a piece of paper and drew a huge sun in the center, something that Kagaya didn't understand for several seconds until Naruto pointed at the same drawn sun and then at himself. Sun. Pillar of the sun. Do you want to be the pillar of the sun? It was no surprise that when a pillar took the place of the previous one, its breathing also took its place and a completely new name was assigned. This had happened with the lightning pillar, which was no longer present within the pillars, or the flower pillar, which was replaced by the insect pillar. Good. I suppose there will be no objections to the new title, Kagaya admitted, nodding and accepting Naruto's self-description of the sun pillar. It is strange. If you could speak, I would ask you why you chose that. Is it because of your flames? Or because of their origin? Naruto gave a simple shrug and waved his hand slightly indicating that it could be due to any of the aforementioned reasons. Good, Naruto-kun. You will be the sun pillar replacing Rengoku-san. I hope you will do your best to keep us moving forward as hunters in this constant war. Naruto nodded and Kagaya showed a slight smile. Before I forget, I have a young hunter that you might be able to help. His name is Tanjiro Kamado. He is one of the newest hunters. Rengoku was going to help him with his fire breathing, but with this incident, the training that Rengoku was going to impose on the young man has been cancelled. There were also Inosuke and Zenitsu with young Kamado. Kagaya was going to take advantage of the new pillar to finish what Rengoku had planned. One of the former flame pillar's remaining tasks was to train the 3 young hunters, the main objective of which was to help Tanjiro with his new breath, which seemed to have a very strong effect on the demons. They had a new weapon to use against them, and they couldn't waste it. I believe that's all I have to tell you, Naruto-kun. You may leave and resume your duties as a pillar in the service of the Demon Extermination Corps. In the war against the demons, hunters had to be as well prepared as possible. They had to hone their senses, their skills, and improve their control over their own breathing, which would give them greater strength and control over their own abilities. A hunter could not neglect their training, and those of higher rank had to assist the younger ones when requested. Naruto had never felt compelled to train anyone. Since joining the Demon Slayer Corps, he worked completely alone and without the company of anyone other than his faithful crow, who carried messages from the Slayer's headquarters to help him complete his assigned missions. It was his raven Kasugai who had alerted him to the confrontation and the train derailment. He had been in the area when his messenger bird informed him of a clash between hunters and demons. He might have rejected the idea of going, but Naruto wasn't a hunter who would leave his companions without the necessary support. Lightly, the new Pilar caressed the mark on his neck, the one that reminded him of how cruel and bloodthirsty the demons were, to the point of madness. That was why they had to be exterminated, to end their suffering. Naruto readjusted the scarf, completely covering his neck and the lower part of his face. His blue eyes shifted and focused on the figures of the 3 injured men. The young hunters had returned to their morning training to see if they could perform certain tasks, despite the injuries caused by Akaza. Oh. Naruto-san. One of the girls noticed Pilar's presence. At the greeting, the rest of the people in the courtyard looked at the blonde with some interest. How have you been? Aoi Kanzaki walked toward the blonde, showing that she was familiar with the pillar. As you can see, we're helping with the recovery of the new ones. Tanjiro, Inosuke, and Zenitsu stopped their push-ups. Above them, the 3 sisters sat on their backs, creating an extra weight that the boys had to overcome. Do you know him? Zenitsu looked at his 2 companions. He was the one who rescued Rengoku-san from the fight against the upper moon. The glow in Tanjiro's eyes intensified, generating small flames that shone in his gaze. Tanjiro had been the only one to witness the fight between Naruto and Akaza. He was fascinated by the pillar's ability to breathe and how it handled the sword as if it were an extension of its own arm, to the point where its limb seemed completely stretched when it lunged. What have you come for, Naruto-san? Aoi received a scroll from the blonde side. Have you come to train our 3 favorite patients? Naruto nodded at the girl's question. That's perfect, Aoi clasped her hands and looked at the 3 boys. Your help will be very helpful for their recovery. I think Shinobu will be happy and okay with it. A slight blush appeared on the sun pillar's cheeks, which was hidden by the scar she always carried with her. 0. Tanjiro. Inosuke. Zenitsu. I've got your new training schedule, and Naruto-san will be in charge of you. Aoi was in charge of designing recovery training for injured patients. And she had an ideal one for her favorite patients. Chapter 3. To wield Nichiren katanas in swift movements that had the power to sever a limb, hunters needed muscle strength beyond that of an average human, even reaching superhuman strength. This was necessary so that the hunters could effectively sever the heads of demons before demonic regeneration prevented the death of the demon the hunter was trying to kill. This strength had to be maintained through constant exercise for hunters. Movement of the legs, arms, and trunk were vital for surviving a confrontation with a demon or for being able to kill one without suffering a fatal wound, as was the case with younger and novice hunters. The hunter's physical strength had to be matched by true mental strength and complete control over their lungs, which gave them the skills necessary to exterminate a demon. However, this training was usually provided by an instructor skilled in one of the existing breaths, or the hunter had the talent to create their own breath, using their master's breath as a basis for their own. The hunter had to have precise control over his breathing, over his lungs. A sudden change in breathing could result in the hunter's blood splattered across the battle zone, his head severed by the demon, or his head eaten by the prey he was hunting. This was the leading cause of death among younger hunters, those just beginning their careers as members of the Demon Extermination Corps. Due to the arduous training required of the hunters to stay in shape and avoid being killed like their peers, only a total of 9 pillars existed out of the hundreds of hunters currently in existence. These 9 outstanding hunters had near-perfect mastery over their breathing, their bodies, and their minds, giving them the ability to stand up to more than one ordinary demon, and likely one of the demon moons in Musen service. Or at least it was what was said among the younger hunters and those who had seen the pillars in action at some point in their careers. "Don't move, Boruto." Inosuke Hashira was one of the surviving hunters from the train incident. One of the many who was tricked by one of the moons and witnessed the battle between Rengoku and Akaza, as well as one of the injured in the incident. Inosuke had developed his own fighting style using Nichiren swords. Because of the incident, the hunter with the boar's head on his face lost his old swords and was waiting for new ones, so he used 2 jagged sticks as practice swords. Ugre. The young hunter was raised by wild boars in the forest, and because of that, he had developed his own breathing. He was someone capable of moving all his joints, all his limbs, and even his organs to perform the craziest and wildest movements a person had ever seen. In complete silence, Naruto blocked Inosuke's first sword and slipped under the boy's defense, causing him to only swing at nothing with his second staff, growing frustrated at having missed. When Inosuke landed with his feet on the ground, he twisted his torso to jump again, but this time in the opposite direction. Naruto. Naruto lightly removed the scar from his chin, revealing a scar to Inosuke's hidden eyes. Taking advantage of that second of hesitation, the pillar traveled the distance and struck the boy in the stomach with a loud splat sound that left Inosuke on his knees, his swords gone, gasping for air in agony. It's amazing. Naruto and Inosuke weren't alone in their training. At Kagaya's request, the young Uzumaki took the 3 boys as his apprentices for a time. He had to ensure that Tanjiro's new breathing would have the effect the boy desired. Naruto rearranged his scarf, hiding his chin and the scar on his neck. He had played Inosuke and used that to his advantage. Throwing the boy off guard was part of his plan and a way to keep the fight from dragging on too long. Both Inosuke and the other 2 should learn that he would do anything to win and act accordingly, as he moved impulsively and acted to surprise his opponents, as he did with Akaza. At the memory of the upper moon, Naruto narrowed his eyes slightly and tightened his grip on the handle of his sword. It had been the only demon to date that had escaped him, and that only infuriated him. Naruto shook his head and extended his arm. The wooden sword pointed directly at Tanjiro. Communication between the 3 young men and the pillar was complicated. Naruto couldn't generate any vocal sounds beyond his strange air-formed whistling that formulated the words assigned to his breathing, which was both strange and surprising. Because of this, the boys began analyzing their mentor's behavior to align his desires with his movements. Good. Tanjiro gulped as he stood in front of the pillar with the wooden sword in his hands. They had recently been partially discharged and were able to begin more rigorous exercises. Thanks to that, Naruto began training them in swordsmanship. Go. Young Kamado took the first step and blinked when he didn't see Naruto in front of him, only a small speck of dust moving towards the sky. Instincts and a little experience made Tanjiro's body move backward, evading Naruto's circular slash. But he couldn't avoid the full power behind the movement, as the air caused him to stumble back slightly. That blow was going with greater force than Rengoku-san's. Naruto wasn't a muscular swordsman like Pillar of Rock, who wielded the greatest physical power within the Demon Slaying Corps. But he had a well-built body from his years learning to wield the sword and various weapons, such as the bow and sickle. The sword pointed at Tanjiro again. The boy slid his left leg slightly forward while simultaneously bringing his right back. He bent his left knee slightly, shifting his entire torso weight onto that limb. He's going to lunge again. He's going to hit hard as soon as I move. If I don't move, he won't attack. Tanjiro stood his ground, waiting and waiting. Saliva trickled down his throat. Sweat trickled down his temples, dripping directly onto the grass. But seconds passed and turned into minutes. Facing him, unmoving, Naruto remained calm, looking at him with calm blue eyes. It was impossible for Tanjiro to know what Naruto was thinking. He wasn't moving, he didn't seem to be breathing, and his eyes were fixed on him, faintly following his every move. He really is too patient. I don't see him sweating, I don't see him trembling, or how his chest moves with each breath. Is he in a trance? I haven't even seen him blink. The tension hit Tanjiro like a heavy one-ton slab. For several minutes, he stood in the same position. His legs began to tire, and his muscles began to ache, from his calves to his shoulders, like an electric whiplash that pounded steadily with each passing second, like constant needle pricks. Naruto bowed his body. Tanjiro sighed. A single blink of an eye and the sun pillar was gone from young Kamado, just as it had been before. Tanjiro looked around, searching, trying to find any clues. But this time he couldn't even see a trace of dust, anything to indicate where his master was. Suddenly, Tanjiro felt the blow. It was hard and direct, causing him to hunch forward, spitting out enough saliva to be considered spit up. The boy fell to his knees and bent down, hitting his forehead against the cool ground, trying to forget the pain. Naruto walked alongside Tanjiro, leaving him behind. He swung his wooden sword and pointed it at Zenitsu. The swordsman stepped back nervously, sweating. I don't think it's necessary, thank you. Zenitsu hit his forehead against the ground, placing himself in a submissive pose before the pillar, raising his hands in a sign of peace under the swordsman's hard gaze. Shall we leave it for another day? The boy was a coward, constantly afraid. Only when he was asleep did his true nature emerge, that innate fighter that slumbered within him, capable of facing demons without showing any fear or tears falling down his cheeks. But Naruto-chan is teaching my favorite patience. Pilar showed no emotion at the female voice. He took the edge of the scarf in his left hand and brought it up to his nose, completely covering his chin. Aw, you're so adorable when you're embarrassed. The insect pillar appeared to one side of the sun pillar, denoting the difference in height between the two pillars, with the girl being at least 20 centimeters shorter than the boy. So cute. The girl pecked Pilar's cheek despite the thick scarf. I hope you treat my patients well. I don't want to see them in my office for a long time. Shinobu Kacho looked at the three younger boys critically, observing them without missing a single detail. Inosuke and Tanjiro were knocked down by Naruto with a direct blow to their stomachs. Zenitsu was spared due to his innate cowardice. You haven't treated them well at all, Naruto-chan, the pillar shrugged at the insect pillar's whine. Moo. You're mean, Naruto-chan. Sparks flew as Shinobu's Nichiren was repelled by Naruto's. I'm going to punish your bad attitude. Naruto swung his sword, deflecting each of his opponent's thrusts. Shinobu's fighting style didn't focus on slashes, but rather on thrusts, executed as if they were insect bites. Because of this, the woman was fast, tenacious, tireless, and her reflexes were superior to those of any other pillar. The blonde shifted his weight to the right. The blade grazed the fabric of his haori, tearing it, almost slicing into the skin beneath it, but failing. Since we met, you've changed. You're much taller, stronger, and you're not crying anymore. Shinobu found a weak spot in the pillar's defenses. She shifted her feet and coordinated her lower limbs with her torso. Surpassing Naruto's reaction time, Shinobu stabbed the blonde's chest with her sword. Wow. Inosuke looked energetic. She hit him. The Boruto. No, he hasn't. Tanjiro had the better position during the transition of the blow. Just as the tip of the Nichiren was about to touch the Uzumaki's chest, he used what looked like a knife to block the tip just inches from piercing his chest. You and your ninja tricks. I don't know why you don't get along with Uzui. Naruto planted his feet firmly on the ground. Shinobu jumped away from her opponent. At the pillar's dubious question, the blonde shrugged in confusion. You're both ninja fetishists. Naruto opened his eyes slightly. Shinobu lunged at him again, but this time she brought her sword back, searching for a way to pierce through him, cutting through fabric, skin, and muscle at the same time. The less experienced hunter would probably have felt nervous, afraid, or confused at seeing Shinobu advance. But Naruto stood his ground, just as he had with Tanjiro, planting his feet firmly on the ground, wrapping the fingers of both hands around the handle of his practice sword. He sighed. He relaxed his arms, his entire back. He leaned forward slightly and shifted his left leg a few inches in front of his right. He raised the sword above his head, but kept his eyes on the woman. As Shinobu entered range, Naruto swung his sword down in a move that would have split the pillar in two, as the earth itself fractured, and the resulting wind ended up lightly cutting the trunk of one of the thick trees, marking it. Buck. Inosuke couldn't contain his excitement. That was cool, Boruto. Shinobu let out a sigh. She had stopped at exactly the right moment, at the instant when she could have been seriously injured. But what the younger hunters didn't notice, and what she did, was that Naruto would have been about to stop if she had continued forward. I would have let her win. That was a truly dangerous move, Naruto-chan, the woman sheathed her sword and smiled. But I'm glad you're okay after the confrontation with the upper moon. Shinobu wouldn't admit it to the other pillars or members of the demon slaying corps, but she'd been worried about Naruto when she learned he'd faced a demon that nearly killed Rengoku. When she learned he was there, at her estate, she decided to come see him and see for herself that Naruto was really okay and without a scratch on his training heart and body. Eyes. It's time to keep training, Shinobu showed a sweet smile. Your teacher is waiting. Chapter 4. The sword was thrust into the air in front of its owner. The reflection of a pale, tired face was reflected back by the dark steel of the weapon, clearly reflecting its owner, not hiding the crystalline gaze or the lighter than usual skin, or the sweat running down the face of its owner, who sat on the futon, the blanket slipping slightly, revealing his sweat-soaked bare torso. No amount of clothing could hide his muscular torso, the scars that adorned his arms and torso alike, and not even the scarf could hide the scar that reminded the young man of his worst moments, making him appear imposing. Because of the same scarf, the marks on his face had also been hidden from anyone who could see them. There were 6 in total, resembling the whiskers of a cat or a fox, which gave the boy's face a much friendlier appearance, despite the fact that he couldn't utter a single word. Naruto pulled back the blanket, allowing the moon to observe the scarred kanji on his back. It was another memory, one that constantly reminded him of his own desire and thirst for revenge, the very thing that had driven him to become a hunter and compelled him to constantly wield his sword. Each member of the Demon Slayer Corps had a past, a story that led them to become hunters and fight demons. Some members were children of former members, like Rengoku or relatives, creating a lineage of hunters within the organization. Others, however, were introduced when members recommended them, being young people affected in one way or another by demons or the cruelty of life. And he was one of those. Naruto massaged the back of his neck and watched the reflection of his sword reflect back at him. A reflection that was always present every night when he woke up and which he knew perfectly well because he knew it was him and at the same time, it wasn't him. They were his fears, his nightmares. Thousands of people hid their fears, but they were always haunted by them. Naruto was no exception. His fears were tied to his past, to what he couldn't change, and to what happened because of his indecision, his inability to act when necessary. What weighed him down the most, though, was his inability to do anything. His greatest fears, his nightmares, occurred when he turned 4, resulting in the scar on his neck and the kanji on his back. But it was the moment that most marked his life and the one that pushed him to become who he was today, giving his all in sword training when he came under the tutelage of his godfather. Naruto finally stood up, revealing himself to be completely naked. His hunter uniform was placed a few feet away, to the left of the bed. He walked over and proceeded to put it on, covering his body with each piece of clothing, hiding the scars, hiding the kanji that was engraved on his back. There was no longer any pain in his movements, in his eyes when they saw each of his scars. He wasn't the only hunter with scars, but he was the only one who had broken his body to become who he was. Each of the marks that ran across his limbs had its own story, just like the scar on his neck or the kanji on his back. And all of them together formed his history and formation as a hunter and now, as a Pilar. The Haori fell over the shirt seconds later as blue eyes stared at the young man in front of the mirror, without a scarf. The marks on his face were another cruel etching that left a mark on his skin. He could still feel the teeth breaking the skin, slicing through the flesh to leave those 6 lines that marked him. Naruto had never told anyone about his marks. None of the other hunters knew where they came from or who caused a scar on his neck or who caused him to lose his voice. The pillar never saw the need to share it, and he carried the memories like a backpack, like a burden. They were constant, vivid, and sometimes kept him awake at night, creating a vicious cycle. Young Pilar's right hand took the handle of his Nichiren, which was nailed to the floor a few meters from his bed, right between it and the mirror in front of it, like a thin line that no one should cross. Oh. I knew you'd be awake. The clatter and the sound of a foot hitting wood made the pillar move, fixing its eyes on the person who had spoken. Every time I see that scar, I'm surprised you're still alive. The person stopped when he reached the threshold of Naruto's room, standing outside on the porch. Dropping the wooden crutch, the figure sat down as he looked up at the moon. It's a beautiful night. The moon and the stars never leave your sight. Sorry. It almost seems like I've come to enjoy the view from your house, but I came to thank you. Thanks to you, I'm still alive. The golden eyes of the flame pillar met the blue ones of the sun pillar, both shining brightly. Naruto merely nodded slightly, and Rengoku looked back up at the night sky, sitting, waiting for his replacement to sit next to him, something the Uzumaki didn't take long to do. Apparently, the blow from the demon Akaza has only completely paralyzed my leg. I have to move around with that crutch, and I can barely drag my leg. Rengoku's smile was radiant despite the sorrow that filled his words. The injury sustained during the fight with Akaza had left one of the flame pillar's legs immobile. For several hours, doctors believed the young swordsman would be completely paralyzed. It was a welcome surprise that Rengoku ultimately emerged with only one affected leg, although this had left him unable to perform his duties as a pillar. I'm not trying to overwhelm or reproach you. Anyone else might have collapsed or blamed someone else for their fall. Rengoku knew he couldn't have defeated Akaza if he shielded the people on the train, reducing his own strength to force the upper moon to focus on him. I'm grateful that I only lost a leg, that I can still see my brother and my father and the rest of my companions. I want to thank you. Silence fell between the two hunters. The wind stirred the hair of both young men, moving the leonine mane of the former flame pillar and the messy hair of the sun pillar. Both kept their eyes fixed on the night sky, staring at the moon above them, sending its silver light down onto the lawn of the Uzumaki's backyard. What calms my thoughts, the words floated, enveloping both young men, is that you will protect them better than I have so far. I have no doubts and I don't need proof. Perhaps the rest of the pillars, except for Shinobu, will need to see what you are capable of, and your relationship with Yuzui isn't perfect, really. But they will see what Shinobu, the boss, and I have seen in you. Akaza. What do you think of him? That demon, he didn't just show up to kill. I know my abilities and strength perfectly well. Akaza was far beyond what anyone could handle. It's surprising you managed to do it. Naruto readjusted his scarf, covering the lower part of his face. He kept his eyes on the moon, making no gesture at Rengoku's words. He couldn't have said anything at all in response to the ex-pillar's speech. If you hadn't arrived, I probably would have died. And my life was saved thanks to your intervention. Memories of the fight against the upper moon were still fresh in their memory, making the blood boil beneath the new pillar's skin. Akaza had been the first demon to escape and he still had his head on his shoulders, ready to continue murdering more innocent people. Naruto took a deep breath and took a piece of paper and a piece of charcoal. Rubbing it, he wrote what his mouth couldn't say and his mind couldn't express. Will I be able to heal you? Rengoku blinked and smiled at the sun pillar's words. Don't waste your time, Naruto. There's no need. I'm fine. I'm getting used to the idea of not being able to fight anymore. Few hunters ever achieved complete retirement from their duties as hunters. The few who managed to reach old age continued their work as hunters, training younger ones, as had been the case with Tanjiro and Zenitsu. Rengoku had already resigned himself to taking this path in life, as he couldn't imagine himself far from his fellow pillars or the rest of the hunters, although it might be nice to think of a cure for his injury. Naruto looked at the sheet of paper he'd written on. He proceeded to write on it again, sliding the charcoal over the paper without much hesitation, crossing out the previous sentence. A few seconds later, he showed the sheet of paper and the new sentence to his partner. Rengoku's eyes widened slightly as he grasped the written words. A few seconds later, the flame pillar laughed dryly, understanding that it couldn't make Naruto give up on his new crusade. Once something got into the Uzumaki's head, the chances of it being forgotten were zero. You're being too insistent, Naruto. And I know you're not going to drop the subject no matter how much I insist. I'm fine. Hot tears began to fall from Rengoku's eyes, hitting the back of his hands as he bowed his head, trying to hide his face. The young man was frustrated and felt like he should have died in his confrontation with Akaza. He might have been the most optimistic pillar, but it had scarred him for the rest of his life, leaving a scar tied to his bitter victory. The hunter's goal was to eliminate the demons, protecting the civilians at their own expense. This was what Rengoku did when he fought Akaza. He protected all the civilians on the train and stalled the demon long enough for reinforcements to arrive. But despite having accomplished his objective, the frustration still lingered. He felt like he should have died, that his fight with Akaza should have been his last, and not be crippled for the rest of his life, like a mere flame-breathing master. Naruto's eyes shone slightly. The sun pillar didn't respond or try to comfort his companion. Letting the tears flow was the best thing that could happen now. Although he couldn't do much either. Without a voice to comfort Rengoku, he could only watch, feeling empathy for his companion and hatred for the demons, making Akaza his second target. If I kill Akaza first, will my relatives be upset? Naruto couldn't fully understand Rengoku's suffering. His injury only left him unable to speak, but he could still wield a sword, using it as all members of his clan had done for generations. However, Rengoku's injury had left him bound to a crutch for the rest of his life, removing him from any danger situations for his own good. And despite not being able to fully understand Rengoku's feelings, Naruto was willing to kill Akaza the next time he saw him. Surely your voice would sound a little encouraging now, don't you think, Rengoku? The light tap was heard as Shinobu appeared in front of both pillars, surprising the former flame pillar, while drawing a flat glare from the sun pillar. I'm still imagining what your voice sounds like, Naruto. The girl's lips showed a slight smile. I'm sorry to interrupt your evening meeting, guys, but the boss has requested your presence, Naruto. It seems a young noble has requested an escort for his journey, so we have been assigned as his escort along with the novices. But they need to learn that we don't just hunt demons. The girl's eyes stopped Rengoku from replying. We don't fund ourselves by hunting demons. The government may know what we do, but that's where our connection ends. The Demon Extermination Corps functioned as a mercenary group in the eyes of society, known for working under the orders of the country's nobles and government. This was the way the hunters could sustain the organization with sufficient funds to continue hunting down demons throughout Japan. I think it's too soon. And I think it's the perfect time. Shinobu placed both hands on her waist. Children should leave their childhood behind and focus on adulthood. If they don't, they'll simply die. As Ringoku went to retort, Naruto's hand stopped him. Shinobu looked the blonde straight in the eyes, hoping to see him share her thoughts. But what she found instead was a calm, slightly glossy gaze, as if trying to convey something to her with that gesture alone. Fine, Pilar looked defeated. But don't think I'm going to let you do all the work. Chapter 5. Hunters received a salary for each completed mission, which varied in difficulty, according to the level of danger of the demon the hunter was pursuing at the time. But the organization didn't only sustain itself by hunting demons. Feudal lords used the Demon Extermination Corps as a private mercenary and security force, hiring their services for trips or meetings. Occasionally, they were used as neutrals when two feuding feudal lords arranged a meeting, serving as witnesses and judges of the conference. The government was not unaware of the existence of the demons and Musen. They were aware of the Khazar's advances, the various clashes, and the casualties within the organization, keeping the situation under wraps, hiding the events from the civilian population, and leaving the organization and Kaguya to deal with the beings that plagued people, causing them to disappear and turning into beings that killed their own families. This matter had been kept secret for hundreds of years, ever since the appearance of the first demon, the one who had established a reign of terror and created a superior race, more evolved at the cellular level, with superhuman strength, more developed senses and a regenerative capacity that prevented them from dying easily, even becoming immune to diseases or poisons that could kill a human. Due to the knowledge of these beings, the various leaders of Japan throughout the ages created a secret investigation to locate the birth of the demons, which was exactly what turned Musen into the being he was and how he had been able to turn other people into what he was. But this investigation was cut short by Musen himself, although no one openly acknowledged it. Part of the country's current government was controlled by Musen and his demons, thus having the cover to hide, move in the shadows, and hinder the hunters who pursued him. This had been an event that occurred 150 years ago, when Musen and one of his upper moons controlled the Emperor's right-hand man for a time, nearly destroying the Hunter Corps and even killing the organization's leader at the time, revealing the vulnerabilities of both the government and the hunters at the same time. And it was at this moment that the Emperor and his entourage decided to strengthen their ties with the hunters, even including truly competent hunters in the imperial family security, with the necessary skills to defend them from Musen and his followers. All of this had been kept hidden in history, being the backbone of the Demon Extermination Corps legend, being an important part of its history, and the reason why many of its members belonged to samurai clans, families dedicated solely to the way of the sword. The hunters' income depended on the Emperor and their work as demon hunters. The younger, lower-ranking members focused solely on hunting demons, doing what they were created to do. The most talented, the adults, and those with superior skill worked both ways, selling their sword to any feudal lord who required it or to the imperial family itself, which was a great honor. An urgent mission had recently arrived, a request from a feudal lord. At the same time, the Sound Pillar had taken 3 young men from the Butterfly Estate to investigate the disappearance of several escorts in the Red Light District, right where their wives were infiltrated. This forced Kaguya to switch teams and form one with 3 pillars for the protection of the feudal lord who had requested the services of the Demon Extermination Corps. On the way to Kyoto, a large group of people marched in a linear formation. In the center of the formation was a carriage pulled by 4 horses. It was elegant, maroon in color, and adorned with gold details that contrasted with the reddish color of the wood that formed the horse-drawn vehicle. Inside the float were 3 or 4 people. Shinobu, Naruto, the Wind Pillar, and a man with a chubby face and body, his upper lip adorned with a thick greasy copper-colored mustache. The man in front of the 3 pillars was a member of one of Kyoto's feudal families, one of the governors of one of the city's surrounding areas. His pig-like eyes always remained fixed on Shinobu, and his sly smile had caused the albino swordsman's teeth to grind. Tsunemi Shinazagawa was the Wind Pillar, a member of the Demon Slaying Corps and a completely accomplished swordsman, highly skilled but also overly temperamental, giving his respect to those he truly believed deserved it. The 3 young men were sent by the boss to carry out the mission initially assigned to the first 2 pillars and the 3 young men involved in the train incident. With Yuzui acting on his own, Kaguya felt compelled to ask Tsunemi to join the mission. With his eyes closed, the scarf covering the lower part of his face and the katanas on his legs, Naruto remained completely still throughout the journey, listening to the hurtful words of the noble he was supposed to escort, hearing the insults against his own people, how they were treated like mere tools. It had always been this way, since the beginning of the relationship between the hunters and the country's government. The nobles, those with money, believed they could rule the hunters like dogs, using them as mere throwaway toys. and the hunters were simply supposed to keep quiet and obey orders. So, Miss Shinobu, the nobleman's dark eyes moved toward the front of the small huntress's body, and the man licked his lips as if he were observing some plate of food, some pastry. You are a pillar. How strong is one of those pillars anyway? Those demons are really strong, from what grandfather once said. The tone of his voice turned mocking when he mentioned the word pillar. Sanemi's eyes narrowed into two lines, but he kept his attention on the forest, peering out the carriage window in an attempt to observe any strange movements. Mr. Matsumoto. The pillars are the greatest force against the demons these days, the best at fighting them or protecting men like you. Shinobu smiled sweetly, too sweetly. But Matsumoto didn't see the danger in the small woman or the smile. He didn't understand that the most colorful insects were the most dangerous. We are the spearhead against the enemies and we are the shield when all else fails. Believe me when I tell you, everyone here has fought against strong demons or against enough to be a pillar. Tsunemi and Naruto weren't the only ones bothered by the man's teasing. With her sweet smile, her thin lips sliding to show her gleaming teeth, Shinobu let her words fill Matsumoto's ears as she closed her eyes and tilted her head slightly to the right, striking the cutest pose she could give to a person she hated. She's as tough as ever, as stinging as a bee. Tsunemi closed his eyes and smiled, hiding the gesture with his hand, amused by the silent anger of the nobleman they were escorting. If it were up to him, the man would have died hours ago. His ears could no longer bear the mockery of Kagaya or those comrades he respected. There was no response from the nobleman. As Matsumoto was about to speak, fire engulfed the carriage and an explosion startled the men. Seconds later, a column of smoke emerged from where the carriage had been, where only charred splinters now remained. I don't know why Lord Muzan ordered us to kill that human, a young man wearing a modified hunter's outfit, wearing yellow details while wearing a black kimono over it. Was that guy that important? Kagaku, a yellow-eyed demon stood beside the young demonic swordsman. Because you are the favorite of the Upper Moon One, you must not contradict or question Lord Muzan's orders. With Enmu's death, the position of the lower moons is very unstable, and your eagerness to be strong could be both a positive and a negative. This situation has been brought under control. Muzan will reward you accordingly. Lower Moon 2 kept his eyes on the area where the chariot had been, searching for any trace of the target or its escort surviving. But his senses were the ones that warned him. He raised both arms, and Kagaku used his sword to block both of his opponent's blades. Sparks and blood flew, and the two demons were sent tumbling to the ground, while Tsunemi and Naruto took their places. Ha! Tsunemi pointed his sword at Kagaku. What the hell is that demon doing in the hunter's uniform? The blue eyes turned into sharp daggers of ice. Naruto understood in seconds why Kagaku wore that outfit, why he used a sword like the other hunters. The demon had, at one point, been a member of the Demon Slayer Corps, one of them. You're too dull to understand, hunter. The blade came into view between the two pillars. I was a hunter like you, but I accepted that which made me stronger. Tsunemi jumped to the right and Naruto to the left. The sparking wind sickle sliced through the branch where the two pillars had been, completely shattering it. He really is strong. He's going to reach high within the demon moons. The second lower one gritted her teeth, understanding Kagaku's capabilities as she watched him move and advance without the fear of death that would have accompanied him as a human. But what Rikura didn't expect was a human without the true fear of death, a human who had stood before the cadaverous face of the Grim Reaper. San. The two blades moved in sync, forming two rings of fire that looked perfectly like two solid, strong, diamond-like rings. As Kagaku's movement was about to reach Naruto, the blonde gritted his teeth to stop swinging his swords. 3 seconds. Both swords sliced through space and shattered the ground on either side of the demon who had once been a hunter. If you take care of the demon child, Tsunemi leaped. He guided the sword until it pointed in the opposite direction he was heading. I'll take care of the goatee man. Bakuro. Take care of the blonde one, Kagaku. Two swords clashed. Sparks flew as the two blades met, again and again, again and again. Letting his arms move from years of training, Kagaku swung his sword as he would have done in the past, letting his lungs swell with air, every muscle fiber pushed further than it had ever been pushed before. Experience guided Naruto's swords, deflecting the demon's blade every time it attempted to pierce his body. When he found a gap in the young demon's defense, the Uzumaki drove his left sword into the ground and used it as leverage to kick Kagaku's chest, sending the demon several meters back. Shit. The lightning breath had been passed on by the last roaring pillar to two young aspiring hunters. Zenitsu and a young, self-centered boy who eventually disappeared over time. But now Naruto had found that boy. The demon in front of him was a lightning breath user. He could sense it from his movements, his swift and accurate attack intent, a decisive move against his body. If he weren't at a higher level almost comparable to Upper Moon Tess, Kagaku's sword would probably have seriously injured him. I'll say it's surprising Naruto took the collar of his scarf to completely hide his chin as Kagaku spoke, but I haven't used the breath tense muscles, sharp gaze, fingers gripping the katana handle. Lightning breath the atmosphere changed. Air escaped from between Kagaku's teeth forming two lines of steam. Fourth stance. Distant thunder. The lightning gathered. A long-range attack. Smiling, Kagaku swung his sword, mimicking the motion his master had taught him, recreating it perfectly, but with greater power, one that would finish off his enemy. Beyond, 4. The left sword remained planted in the ground. Naruto wrapped his hands around the handle of the single sword, holding it raised above his head. He pressed his lips together, opened them slightly, took a deep breath, and brought the sword down with all the strength in his arms at a surprising speed, preventing anyone from seeing the actual movement if they weren't well positioned, and Kagaku couldn't see it because he was right in front of his enemy. Naruto brought the sword down a total of 4 times, remaining down when the final swing was performed. This caused the movement to have a force multiplied by 4, which in turn added to the muscular force the swordsman exerted in each of the movements. Both movements collided in the center, generating an explosion that hit each one from its opponent. But not everything was rosy. 5. The fifth slash caused the dust to vanish and surprised Kagaku. As the demon attempted to recover, the attack sliced through his body and sent him crashing into a stand of trees, a gash running across his body from left to right, nearly splitting him in two. The breath left the swordsman's mouth in a calm sigh, slightly accelerated by the powerful movements he had to perform, modifying the movement to include the fifth movement and surprise his opponent to injure him and, if possible, kill him, although the chances were minimal. The fat man is still alive. Bakuro's head fell at the Uzumaki's feet. It had begun to slowly disintegrate. Why would some demons go after that fatso? Sanemi looked straight in the direction Kagaku was sent. Are we really going to get involved in political movements? No way. Don't look at me like that, you blonde idiot. I'm not going to play your political games. Shit. Okay. No need to give me that look, idiot. Sanemi spat out the words, sheathing his sword. Let's go for the bug one, damn it. I want to make the nobleman talk. Naruto stared at the albino's back for a few seconds before looking at his swords. Both blades showed a chip, a crack. Chapter 6. The moon shone over the city of Kyoto, enveloping its streets and buildings in a silver hue, spreading the dim light over the city's inhabitants, expanding the darkness in the alleys, and making them darker, dangerous for some people, and an opportunity for others. Kyoto was one of Japan's most important cities. Home to the largest number of temples, the city was constantly visited by tourists, festivals, or monks seeking atonement. As a city with a significant level of tourism, it was under the scrutiny of the emperor's nobles and trusted personnel, making the city a major meeting point for feudal lords and important figures in the service of the empire, filling the streets with soldiers and guards at certain times of the year. Due to the number of nobles who visited Kyoto throughout the year, the houses of the feudal lords were spread out across the important areas of the city, with extensive grounds that allowed the families a peaceful stay, which was maintained by a large group of guards who constantly patrolled the house of each feudal family, ensuring that each of the families could have the necessary peace to carry out their daily activities without being disturbed or, failing that, attacked. To keep the hunters as close to the Kyoto governor's residence as possible, the governor himself had given them asylum in his mansion, a building that was close to the castle, but outside the protection of its walls. This house had belonged to the family for 200 years when the family was recognized by the shogun and granted the land where the mansion now stood, and it was fortunate that the castle was located right behind it, imposing, with its thick walls visible. The governor and his family slept inside the castle, so lending his mansion to people who protected them from demons or other enemies was the least he could do. In one of the rooms of the governor's mansion, there were 2 figures enveloped in the dim light of the moon. If you looked directly at them, the back of the figure above the other was completely dark due to being in front of the light of the night star, which was the only witness to what was happening in that room. Their clothes were scattered across the bedroom floor. The sheet had slowly slipped off, revealing the woman's slender back. It had no blemishes or scars to disfigure it. Her skin was white and soft, smooth as a baby's. The man was underneath the woman, his hands holding her slender waist, keeping her completely pressed against him, while she only moved slightly back and forth, creating a constant friction between his and her intimacy. Slowly, her right hand traced a line down the man's tan torso, from his pecs to his lower abdomen, reaching below his navel. The man breathed deeply, feeling the warm touch spread throughout his body, not just his chest and abdomen. He felt it in his arms, his back, and his legs. With dazzling eyes, he looked into the face of the woman above him. Their cheeks, which had previously been as white as chalk, now displayed a rosy hue that seemed to have been dusted across the woman's cheekbones. Her neat, short hair, which had been decorated with a butterfly clip, was now disheveled, with strands falling and framing her heart-shaped face. The woman's enormous eyes had not left the boy's, connecting the purple of her enormous eyes with the blue of his eyes, making the two become much more intimate, connecting beyond just the physical. The boy breathed and began to sit up, causing the girl to slide backward. Before she could fall onto the futon, an arm stopped her, grabbing her waist and preventing her from falling onto her back, forcing the girl to be pressed against the young man's chest. Neither of them moved for several seconds. They maintained their steady, relaxed breathing, in sync with each other's, both looking directly into each other's eyes. It was the girl who broke the silence in the room. Raising her head, she stared at the boy's face for about 5 seconds before finally deciding to speak. "I guess thinking of the lady and the beast could be a complete representation of us two." Shinobu's sweet, honeyed, and warm voice enveloped the boy completely, but, although in a certain way it is true, it is even very false the fact that you can be the beast. There was no vocal response from the boy. He raised his hand and gently brushed a few strands of hair away from Shinobu's face, letting her fair skin be kissed by the faint rays of the moon. A truly beautiful sight. "Your skin is very warm," the girl murmured, bringing her cheek much closer to the young man's hand. "Contrary to what many people think, your eyes give you expression. You're much more expressive than anyone might expect if you don't speak." Shinobu closed her eyes and let her body take control, sending any alarms in her mind to a deeper part of her head. For the first time in a long time, she was letting herself go, feeling the touch of that hand, the thumb lightly stroking her cheek in a gentle, delicate way. She was letting herself be enveloped by the warmth of her partner's body, being embraced completely. Slowly, winter had given way to spring. The snow had faded, giving way to spring flowers. But the cold was still present on some nights, leaving its icy touch in the different homes, a touch that faded from Shinobu's body with a mere contact with the boy's naked body, who was unwilling to let go. "I love these missions. We can be together without anyone watching." Shinobu's right arm slowly wrapped around the boy's neck, moving much closer to him. "Sleep, eat, and live together for a few days. With everything that's happened in the past few months, we've barely been able to take any time for ourselves," Whiskers-kun. The story between Naruto and Shinobu was born when they met and exchanged glances for a few seconds. At that time, Shinobu had the thought that Naruto was a beast. He had long, messy hair, a visible scar across his neck, and was dressed in ragged clothes that barely covered the boy's starved body. The lone wolf, a predator ready to pounce on the enemy. Shinobu couldn't forget the blood-stained hands and the lifeless eyes that stared back at her. Living dead. That was her first thought about Naruto when she saw him for the first time. They were only a year apart and he was younger than her, but his eyes and appearance gave her a complete picture of what the boy had been through up to that point. "That day, when you tried to kill me," Naruto's frown slowly fell. "Your eyes were barely alive. Only the fire of revenge seemed to fuel them, to move you. You were a mere automaton with blood on your hands." Slowly, delicately, Shinobu kissed Naruto's neck, murmuring soft words about their history, about their past. They had met 9 years ago, their first encounter soured. She could never understand how a child could do what Naruto did, what drove him to do it. Silence reigned for the next few seconds. Neither of them looked at the other, their gazes separated. Naruto looked at their swords, placed across the room, leaning against the wall, as if they weren't going to be used that night. "It's incredible how much you've grown personally, Whiskers-kun. I guess you're like Kanao. Tanjiro is doing a lot to improve his personality." Hanao Tsairi was Shinobu's younger, adopted, sister, a poor girl whom she and her older sister rescued from slavers and took in at the Butterfly Mansion. Although Shinobu initially saw her as a threat, over time she came to better understand what her adoptive sister suffered, even becoming autistic due to abuse from her parents and having been sold to strangers for money. The girl saw Kanao and Naruto when they first met, though she wasn't the one who made him human and not a simple monster who hunted demons with a stolen sword, with his bare hands, looking at nothing but the blood on his hands. And she was pleased with the result of her companion's growth. Naruto stared at Shinobu's face for a few seconds. He moved his hand and gently cupped it, caressing her left cheek with his thumb, feeling her soft, smooth skin beneath his touch, which was slightly cool compared to his own. But that wasn't something he cared too much about compared to Shinobu's enormous purple eyes, which seemed to devour him, envelop him, and swallow him like bottomless pits. "I can't say anything like how beautiful you are, how beautiful your face is. But it's really comforting to me that someone really cares about me, despite not being able to communicate. Even he's understanding about that aspect. He reminds me of an old friend." He couldn't speak, couldn't communicate, couldn't convey what he was thinking to the woman before him, staring at him with those beautiful purple eyes that seemed to drown him as if they were two wells. And they were immensely beautiful, but he could never express them, only think them as often as he wanted, while he held her, while he kissed her. And maybe that would be enough for him for a while, but he wanted to say what he thought about Shinobu, to clarify many things to her using only his voice and not his gestures or his gaze. He didn't even want to use a sheet of paper to communicate with her. He preferred to use his body completely, to put his arms around her and kiss her. The beast has a human heart. Shinobu placed her hand on Naruto's chest. She felt the warmth of his skin. The ice that surrounded this has faded over time. You are no longer as cold as winter. Few people could understand how a 10-year-old boy could become a murderer at such an early age, killing while staring into space, as if they weren't there, as if they weren't murdering anyone, and what they were running through was just a doll. And getting someone like that back to normal, or partially back to normal, was very complicated. Naruto didn't respond to Shinobu's words. He moved his hand and pulled her towards him, kissing her lips in a delicate warm tender kiss that warmed her heart, making it beat wildly inside her chest. Shinobu then pushed Naruto down onto the futon, placing herself on top of him, looking directly into his eyes, allowing him to fully observe her, appreciate her, see her naked body. Only her white skin was visible, bare. At that instant, Naruto wrapped his arm around Shinobu's waist. He seemed to have finally taken the initiative, but as he began to pull her around and spin her so he was on top of her, the swordsman moved his left hand and caught a missile between his index and middle fingers that was intended to pierce Shinobu's chest. By moving the projectile, he deflected another that was launched towards him in a second round, leaving the second one completely inert on the ground, impregnated with a dark liquid. There was no third attempt. Naruto moved off the girl and picked up the projectile from the ground. It was a poisoned kunai. Have they started moving yet? To fund the demon hunting missions, the Demon Extermination Corps worked as external security for the Japanese government, with its main contractors being the imperial family and some feudal lords. Therefore, it was common to encounter attacks that directly targeted them, the guards. Kagaya was right. Covering her body with a fine white kimono, Shinobu looked out at the city in front of them. Finding the connection between the moons and the country's government may be the key to stopping Muzan. We must find the traitor. Naruto looked at Shinobu's back and then at his own swords. The boss had sent them and Tsunemi to find one of the demon's allies who was in Kyoto, inside the city governor's court. The Blue Lily. Chapter 7. The palace's decor was ostentatious, demonstrating the economic power the governor wielded during his family's reign in Kyoto. The walls of the meeting room were covered with various paintings by famous Japanese artists, including portraits by a renowned painter known as Taishin, whose brushstrokes were light, smooth, and beautiful, bringing his charcoal drawings to life. The ostentation of these drawings denoted how much the governor cared about keeping up appearances with visitors to his castle, and thus maintaining the good reputation he had within his inner circle, something that the other feudal lords also did. It was possible that these lords were going through a bad economic patch, but the nobles would never show it to their potential enemies or rivals for the position they occupied, allowing themselves to be seen as powerful and wealthy nobles, even if they were bankrupt. This type of situation often occurred during periods of war, when a noble was in direct confrontation with another noble, which the imperial family did not usually support unless they had a huge interest in it, so the nobles themselves had to seek financing and support among their peers, reaching cases in which they became indebted and bankrupt despite having obtained victory over their enemy. But these kinds of situations had slowly been forgotten. Over the years, feudal lords had stopped fighting each other, seeing the value of using assassins to get what they wanted, or of using money and intimidation, as seemed to be happening currently in Kyoto. Since arriving in the city, Naruto had noticed various things that led him to believe the governor was being watched and pressured, something that was reinforced by the attack they received the night before in their room, while they were vulnerable. But said attack had been carried out by ordinary humans and not by demons, as the Pilar had expected, which was certainly disconcerting to a degree, as it seemed like a subtle attempt to mislead them about the matter they had come to investigate. The demons had tried to kill them while they were protecting Matsumoto on his way to Kyoto. Such an attack could mean two things. Either Matsumoto was a hindrance to the demons' plans, or she was a loose end they needed to eliminate for the information you could give them, and both Naruto and his two companions were following this line of thought. I understand that Matsumoto is being cared for. The governor's piercing, dark eyes were fixed on the three pillars. The man had thought it appropriate to meet with his family's protectors, especially when he learned of the attack they had suffered the previous night inside their compound, in their bedroom, and while they were in a vulnerable position. The dwarf is making sure she talks. Tsunemi was a young man with a strong character. Due to his past and family situation, the Wind Pillar wasn't someone who could back down when he was already moving forward or when he had already made a point and was willing to defend him, as well as the few remaining members of his inner circle. Oh, Miss Shinobu. There were different types of sword styles and breaths a hunter could use in a confrontation with a demon. Shinobu was a small young woman with a thin body and not enough strength to completely decapitate a demon. Because of this, she had created her own sword style. using different poisons effective against a demon to mitigate its strength and ultimately killing it thanks to this same poison, which easily penetrated her opponent's body thanks to her thin sword, created specifically for thrusting, for piercing the body. Since Shinobu was an expert in poisons and medicine, which was why her family was in charge of the butterfly estate, she had been in charge of obtaining all possible information from Matsumoto about the demons or their possible infiltration into the court of the governor of Kyoto, something that was highly probable if a demon controlled a human using hypnotizing powers or simply under intimidation. With the right poisons, Matsumoto would finally speak out and share everything he knew or didn't know. If the latter was the case, they would have wasted time and killed a self-centered man, something none of the three hunters had any problem with, much less the Sun Pillar. Yes. She'll be able to obtain all the information Matsumoto knows about the traitor, if he knows anything at all, Tsunemi clarified hoarsely. Other men, women, children, and the elderly might have feared the governor's piercing gaze. But Tsunemi wasn't just anyone, and she kept her eyes fixed on the feudal lords without blinking, which was surprising if you ask the governor. She's an expert in her field. The use of poisons alongside the sword was a completely innovative style that no other hunter had displayed since the Demon Slayer Corps began its existence. But to defeat demons, hunters had to innovate and evolve, learning new styles, creating and perfecting them. At least, this was Kaguya's thinking, which he extended to his own children so that the future leader wouldn't frown upon a change within the organization. Keeping his left hand on his katana, Naruto maintained his position a few steps behind Tsunemi, covering the lower part of his face with a scarf and his eyes constantly moving around the room, searching for anything strange that could be an indication of an attack. After the assassination attempt, Pilar had kept his senses fully heightened and alert, searching for the culprit inside and outside the governor's castle, and prepared for another possible attack that would try to take his life. Suspicious, Naruto extended his suspicions to anyone, regardless of whether they were poor, wealthy, or disabled. They suffered an assassination attempt, and anyone in the city, including children and the elderly, was on his target list, which was quite extensive given his experience. Because of this, the boy kept his swords with him at all times, ready to be drawn and used against any potential enemies who might try to harm him or his companions, extending his protection to his mission objective. Before getting a response from the governor, the thick doors of the room opened, producing a creaking sound from the hinges and allowing the three men to see the person entering the room, showing a calm smile on his lips as always. Wharf. Shinobu stopped in her tracks just at the top of the small staircase leading to the governor's seat, looking at the guards before looking at the man sitting in the chair. I've gotten all the information I can from Matsumoto. The poor guy won't be able to speak again for a while, and I feel sorry for him. He won't be able to have children until the end of his life. Anyone could see how sweet Shinobu was, always smiling, willing to help her comrades and protect her loved ones. This personality type spread across various hunters, both male and female, and as in the case of the insect pillar, this was merely a facade to hide the true nature of their own minds, which in Shinobu's case, resulted in a woman willing to do anything if what she loved was in danger. And what is that information, Miss Shinobu-san? The governor didn't seem too keen on extending the pillar's visit to the castle. Like many feudal lords, he viewed them as a mere tool, one too useful for protecting what was truly important, which didn't include the hunters themselves. Oh. She clasped her fingers together and displayed a genuine smile that would have made any man or woman blush. Shinobu was a beautiful young woman who undoubtedly drew attention to herself when she performed these gestures. It's very simple. There's a network of demon creation being run by a strange doctor. Matsumoto had been clear when Shinobu poisoned him. A doctor was creating demons using a type of substance derived from some strange exotic plant, resulting in the appearance of demons all over the region, and none of them were linked to Muzan Kibutsuji, something that was truly strange and something no hunter had expected. According to the feudal lord, the doctor inoculated sick people with this liquid and, after 10 days, instead of dying, the people regained their strength and obtained a strange appearance that, according to the doctor, was a small side effect of the medicine his ancestor had created, but which clearly made it clear that these people became demons after the grace period. Matsumoto-san had been in charge of financing said doctor, but that doesn't explain the information Musa has or his extent of being able to have a train under his power. The strange doctor was not linked to Muzan, and it was something that Matsumoto had not tired of repeating under the effects of the poison inoculated inside him. This doctor seems to be a target for Muzan's demons. And that is why he sent his precious moons after Matsumoto, who is a clear target due to his relationship with said man, although this is not clear. The one that is not clear. Shinobu blinked at the governor's intense voice. But the doctor is a man, Governor Matsumoto said. Matsumoto was vague about this man and didn't elaborate much on his physical appearance. According to him, their entire relationship was either through letters or a messenger who worked for the doctor. one who wore a hunter's uniform. Naruto and Tsunemi looked towards Shinobu. One of yours? That would be even easier, Lord Governor. Shinobu didn't take her eyes off the man even though his glare intensified. Kaguya-sama is not someone who works with demons or their potential allies. And the imperial family knows it. Yet, how many of you want us dead? That includes you, due to the case of your firstborn's death at the hands of a demon we couldn't kill. The man's features remained unchanged, calm, and gentle. He didn't even blink or show a change in his body language, as if he hadn't been affected by Shinobu's words or the intention behind them. My apologies, Shinobu-san. I didn't mean to point out that the Extermination Corps were traitors to the country. The governor had understood the veiled threat and the hidden disgust in the woman's words. Just as among our ranks, there are traitors everywhere, which doesn't exempt the hunters from this. Quite true, Governor, Shinobu relaxed her features. It seems this doctor is working with some renegades from our organization or with some infiltrators and traitors. I've already warned Kaguya-sama through a means that doesn't involve crows. If hunters were involved in the mission, the chances of them being able to inform their comrades through normal means were extremely low, almost zero. Therefore, Shinobu managed to warn her leader without her enemies knowing, or at least taking longer to find and obtain the message. Kaguya-san will then move his hunters and search for the traitors, I suppose. Will any more pillars come to Kyoto? The three hunters noticed the desperation radiating from her tone of voice, as if she wished she had an entire army protecting her and her family. I highly doubt Kaguya-sama will send another pillar to Kyoto, Governor. He already has 3 in the city, and sending another one could cause problems our leader doesn't want. We're not just working to protect the feudal lords. The rest of the country is counting on us. Shinobu's statement was forceful and direct. If any other pillar were sent to Kyoto, it would mean they had failed or weren't fit enough for the mission, leaving the organization vulnerable and its honor tainted by dishonor, though the latter wasn't something Kaguya or the hunters themselves gave much thought to. I understand, sighing, the governor let the hunters know he understood the pros and cons of bringing more pillars or hunters to Kyoto. In that case, you can count on my full support, both mine and that of my own men, without any objection. The doctor's case is elevated to a higher level of urgency, and the investigation is in your hands, hunters. Slowly, the governor stood up. As governor of Kyoto, it is my duty to protect the region, both from potential bandits or deserters, as well as from demons. That is why. The words died in her mouth, and the last thing she could say was hampered by the blood that began to flow from her mouth, in torrents, staining her fine kimono and the wooden floor. Passing through the wall, the chair, and the governor's body, the spear remained in a majestic position, bathed in blood, shining in the dim light of the room as the 3 of them looked on. That was unexpected. Tsunemi murmured, and the sound of the governor's body falling into his seat ended that conversation. Chapter 8. The governor's blood was slowly seeping through the hole in his chest, running down and wetting his body, until it trickled down his legs and slowly formed a puddle beneath the man's feet, wetting his feet and the bottom of his pants, with no one doing anything to stop it from happening. The object that had caused the man's death was still embedded a meter from its intended target, halfway inside the governor, and the tip stuck in the ground, creating a perfect hole with cracks all around it. The object was a dark red, almost black, spear. A spiral relief design adorned the shaft, giving it an exotic appearance that had not been seen in the country at any time in the present or in past centuries, as the weapon was not oriental, but rather appeared European. Both the governor's personal guard and the hunters stood at all times in front of the corpse of the man who ruled the city, showing slight expressions of surprise, for this had not been a movement caused by mistake. Someone had murdered the governor and knew where he was. But the strange thing was that the spear itself had passed through the wall, the seat, and the governor without losing force or speed, remaining embedded in the ground and causing cracks in it due to the combined force and speed. The probability that this had been done by an ordinary man was less than 2%. Everything indicated that a demon had been responsible for this, for the governor's death, and that they had acted in concert with the attackers who attacked the hunters in their chambers. With a strange look, Naruto kept his eyes narrowed, fixed on the spear that had killed his contractor. From the moment the object appeared, he noticed something strange about it and couldn't tear his gaze away. He needed to see what was so strange about it, what was forcing him to keep his eyes on the weapon without being able to blink. Aside from being a European weapon, this spear didn't appear to be made of metal. It didn't shine, it didn't seem to have the weight of other spears, and there was no steel point at the end of the shaft to indicate it was made of metal. Like the rest of the weapon, what protruded from the point indicated that it was the same red, almost black color as the rest, and there was no separation between the point and the shaft, as if the weapon had been forged entirely from pure steel in a mold. It's not a weapon made of steel or iron. I don't see any indication that it was forged recently or long ago. I don't see any bloodstains other than the governor's or any signs of rust. It looks like a newly made weapon, but I have my doubts. Naruto stroked the handle of his katana and readjusted the scarf to cover the lower part of his face, keeping only his eyes fully visible, slightly hidden by the thick strands of his golden hair. Having had a childhood guided by the path of the sword, the Sun Pillar was able to see the strange details of that spear by keeping its eyes on it, analyzing it, searching for where it could have been forged and who was the master blacksmith who created that weapon. Each sword, axe, or spear had been forged by a blacksmith, and each smith had his distinctive mark, his insignia, with which he signed his work for all to see. It was like a painter signing his paintings secretly, with some small inconspicuous decoration hidden within the weapon's design. But Naruto couldn't see any design on that weapon. It was as if no one had forged it, as if it had been born from nothing. A demon, perhaps. But where did he get the spear, or how did he create it out of thin air? Perhaps he's capable of shaping metal. Each demon had a strange set of skills known as demon blood techniques, skills capable of performing wonders that only demons with enough human flesh inside them could use, and it was the only explanation that could be given for the appearance of such a weapon, without anyone claiming it or there being a blacksmith behind its creation. "Have you seen anything, Whiskers-kun?" Shinobu had seen her companion's gaze, the gleam in those sapphire blue eyes. And she knew that Naruto had been analyzing the weapon, searching for the possible culprit of that direct attack that would divide the city of Kyoto into two camps. Those on the side of the governor's son and his enemies, a future governor who was not from that family. The people wanted a change. Naruto pointed to the weapon that had caused that death. Taking a piece of paper and a charcoal stick, the swordsman wrote the word demon on the sheet and pointed again at the spear and then at the governor, implying that a demon had been responsible for that death. A demon? Sanemi blinked a few times before looking at the spear, trying to understand why his companion had associated the attack with demons. The weapon didn't seem strange, there were no eyes or any deformations that would indicate it was demonic, and although its shape was exotic, it looked like an ordinary spear. "Where did you get that, idiot?" Naruto looked at Sanemi with a blank stare. "Can you write it, idiot?" The relationship between the Wind Pillar and the Sun Pillar was extremely strange and amusing to those around the two teenagers. Sanemi, with his strong character, never remained silent for long and ended up insulting the blonde. Meanwhile, due to his inability to speak, Naruto expressed his utterances through his eyes and gestures, which ended up being neutral when he had to express his thoughts about his fellow pillar. "But Whiskers probably writes, you can see it with your eyes, Sanemi." People had flooded the audience chamber, and the guards had to keep the curious under control, pushing some of the servants as far away from the governor's corpse as possible, which was a complicated task. That weapon is strange, to say the least. It doesn't seem to be made of steel, iron, or any known alloy, even nichiren. Not even the tip is metal or shines like metal. Listing the weapon's characteristics was something he learned by watching Naruto work, and it wasn't the first time his partner had performed a similar examination. The shape of the shaft, as if it were a constant spiral, is not a usual design in Japan or Europe. I would even say it's too extravagant for a normal person, a human. And that's despite the fact that we hunters use strange weapons, swords with different shapes. Before the eyes of the pillars and the audience, the spear began to disintegrate, forming a second pool of blood, this one much darker than the governor's. The next second, small needles made of blood shot out toward the astonished spectators, who watched, unable to move. You know. Drawing their swords, the pillars prevented some of the needles from piercing the civilians. But it was complicated. The needles were being controlled. They moved and evaded the swords, grazing the pillars' bodies and passing directly toward the servants. This. Gripping the handle of his katana tightly, bracing his legs, squaring his back, and holding his breath, Naruto guided his sword in a completely vertical and downward cut that generated a sea of flames and wind that destabilized the blood needles, causing them to tremble and fall to the ground completely inert. The sound of applause cut short the shouts. Sitting in the governor's seat, sporting a mischievous look and smile, was a handsome young man with fair skin and messy brown hair. I'm going to say it. That was amazing in my opinion. The governor's body had disappeared, and the blood that belonged to the corpse seemed to have also been used to form those needles. Ryuji-sama. One of the guards stepped forward upon recognizing the governor's eldest son. Sama-ha. Her eyes flashed, calling for danger. It's a good prefix for my name. The sound of the Haori brushing against her was the trigger for the Sun Pillar to move. They're quick to react, sparks flew as the blonde's blades blocked a slash that was about to slice through the guard. And I have to admire that. However, since you're still alive, hunters, I'll have to take the liberty of killing you myself. The glance between the three pillars gave each one their next move. Flexing his legs and moving in time with Ryuji, Naruto intercepted the governor's son and forcibly pushed him through the roof of the fortress. The idiot is going to fight the governor's son who has turned into a demon, right? Exact. And we, like two idiots, are going to investigate the history of the sun and who could have turned him because we're sure it wasn't Muzan, right? That's how it is. Shit. Tsunemi growled. I wanted to fight this time and not leave all the action to him. Why does he never look for clues when things like this happen? Because he's better with the sword. The two figures stared at each other. The wind stirred the pillar's scarf and Haori, while the demon's hair moved forward, partially obscuring his face, creating a striking sight. I know it's strange, Ryuji kept a smile on his lips. I'm a patricide, a monster straight out of the world's darkest myths. A demon in every sense of the word. That woman offered me immortality, and I just took it. Blood lances formed behind the young man. The pillar assumed its combat stance, alert. It's no wonder I was seduced, is it? Your eyes say just that, but they also show the contempt you have for me, the hatred that gnaws at you. What did the demons do to you? The spears flew out like projectiles. Naruto let out his pent-up breath. Hachi. The swords moved like extensions of the arms, as if they were the arms themselves. In a dance of flame and speed, both Sun Pillar swords moved in harmony with their owner, deflecting every thrust, protecting every vital point. I was born into a wealthy family. However, I was born with a condition that alienated me from my family. Heart problems, a body too weak to perform the activities of a child. It was a disgrace to the family, to my father. The spear appeared 20 meters behind Naruto. The blonde saw it out of the corner of his eye. 20 years. That was my time. How did I stay alive? I don't know, but my father soon looked for another successor. This. Naruto swung his right sword in a 360 degrees horizontal slash, creating a perfect spin, a slash that blocked the spear that would have pierced his back. And she, the doctor, appeared. A snap. Blood stained the dark tiles as the tiny needles pierced the pillar's body, striking the nerves directly as if undergoing acupuncture. He gave me a strange blue liquid to drink and called it experimental medicine. Clearly, it wasn't medicine, but it gave me the strength and pace I craved. Become immortal. Take what's mine. Kill my father. I have 2 things on that list and I've waited too long to take them. A year since I took that medicine. And I've already adapted to the enhanced body of a god. Ryuji snapped his fingers. The needles entered Naruto's body completely and passed through, leaving his body like a sieve. Not even a pillar is going to. Hi. Before Ryuji's eyes, 9 fiery tails formed behind the sun pillar. When the swordsman raised his head, he swore he saw eyes like rubies. Chapter 9. Chaos soon spread among the pedestrians strolling through the streets of Kyoto. Soldiers were running toward the governor's castle. The alarms had been triggered and a huge column of smoke was growing toward the sky, like an enormous serpent trying to reach the stars without anyone being able to stop it, but which eventually vanished, letting go of its wish. 2 figures stood atop the main palace building, on the roof. One carried 2 unsheathed swords of different types and lengths. The other seemed to be surrounded by weapons, which were raised in the air behind her, awaiting her lord's command to attack the target. From the first figure, small rivers of blood stained his clothes, making the haori that covered his torso wet and making the clothes underneath it stick to his body, as if he had just emerged from some lake or river. A few seconds earlier, the second figure had managed to wound the first, using blood as a combat tool, displaying his demonic technique in great detail. But despite this, the swordsman remained standing, holding his 2 swords and remaining upright, despite the enormous puddle at his feet, which grew with each passing second. Any ordinary human would have fallen unconscious, or at least collapsed to their knees, unable to stand. The swordsman, the sun pillar, remained standing tall and upright, defying the loss of blood and his cloudy, hazy eyes that prevented him from focusing perfectly on his target. To accomplish such a feat, the swordsman performed total concentration breathing, with the goal of preventing further blood flow, sealing off his lungs and the movement of oxygen within his veins, using this as a type of airtight seal that would give him a few minutes to continue fighting. Although that was only a temporary measure. Using his sword technique, the sun pillar cut his own body using the red-hot blades from his sword technique, cutting the places where the needles pierced him and cauterizing the wounds, thanks to the blade's own heat. The imperfect solar breathing I use won't be able to defeat this guy. I'll have to use something else to make a dent in his body and technique. Sun breathing was complicated, the mother of all other breathing techniques, and a complex technique that no one had been able to imitate. Or rather, almost no one had been able to imitate. Due to the cut on his neck and his malnourished body from his childhood, Naruto had been able to obtain a primitive, poorly developed form of said breath, becoming an above-average hunter and a highly skilled pillar, capable of facing powerful demons. But because of his own injuries, he was unable to follow the path he desired, which would elevate him to glory. However, as a member of a samurai clan, he had an equally ancient style. Combining sun breathing with my technique would be a waste with these swords and at this time. If I want to beat Ryuji, I'll have to use everything my parents taught me. As a hunter, Naruto had a unique breathing technique that gave him a total of 9 imperfect stances that mimic those of sun breathing. As a swordsman and samurai of the Uzumaki clan, Naruto had a long list of sword techniques and moves that he learned from the 7 scrolls, just as his mother and grandfather had before him. It will be risky. One of his swords was nicked and the other had a tiny hairline fracture. These imperfections diminished his cutting power and mitigated his strength when striking his targets, making it difficult for him to finish someone off with a single blow as he would have liked. And the chances of their swords breaking were too high. Are you going to keep quiet after that attack? Moments before the two had separated and stared at each other in silence, Naruto had used the last stance of his precarious breath, striking out with 9 direct blows toward the demon. This had served to ignite Ryuji's spirits and made the swordsman understand the discomfort in his swords and body, so he proceeded to cauterize himself. True. It's not like you can talk, anyway. Right. Those words were laced with venom and mockery, but they didn't seem to bother the swordsman. Naruto kept his eyes fixed on the demon, shifting at intervals to watch the movement of the blood needles floating around Ryuji. That's something I don't find funny. I can't hear your witty retorts. You must be, because those eyes keep staring at me with such coldness. The lips moved. Ryuji displayed a sly, mocking smile. He was trying to get inside his opponent's mind to annoy him enough so that he would rush at him without thinking, like a mindless animal. Throughout his pre-adolescence and mid-childhood, Naruto had been driven by the bitter, acidic desire for revenge. He had longed to kill his parents' killer, the murderers of his clan. And that desire and thought kept him alive for most of both stages. And he still felt it, but he wasn't immature enough to let it cloud his judgment or let Ryuji's words upset him enough to turn him into a mere animal. It's a waste of time, isn't it? Teasing you, bothering you. With such coldness, your parents must have abandoned you, being the strange child you are. The fingers wrapped around the handles of the swords tensed, sending tension through both arms to the swordsman's face, which, covered by the scarf, did not reveal his gestures to the demon. Do you have so little love for them? Doesn't it bother you that I speak ill of them? Or was it they who took away your gift of speech? Or did they see you as a monster because of it? I know thousands of people, but none so evil as to abandon a cripple. Ryuji sought to annoy his opponent. He sought to find a dent in that swordsman, a small breach that would cause him to explode like wildfire, and his best option was to attack his parents, his family. One careless moment and the boy would be skewered by the blood spears. Ryuji, you bastard. I'm going to cut off those limbs. Naruto's eyes narrowed, like slits. He moved his arms, assuming a strange swordsman's stance. The arm with the katana, his right hand, was down, while the one wielding the shorter curved sword, his left hand, was raised above his head as he bent his legs, shifting his weight onto them. What are you doing? Are you going to dance? The smile grew crueler, more pronounced. Ryuji raised his right arm and extended it toward the swordsman. Let's see you dance. This requires overwhelming physical strength. Muscles tensed. Naruto leaned forward slightly, shifting his weight onto his right leg. Sword dance. Beneath the clinging clothes, muscles swelled, rippling out from under them. Two-sword style. Air escaped from between the corners of his lips. Moonfang dance. Ryuji smiled. The guttural roar escaped the swordsman's silent throat. The needles, formed from the blood of the sun pillar and the blood he'd taken from the governor, launched themselves at their target, intending to pierce through it and turn it into a living cactus. But to the demon's surprise, Naruto deflected each of those fine, almost imperceptible needles, seeing the swords at superhuman speed, surpassing the reflexes of the demon trying to kill him, creating a defensive dome that was almost impregnable. Steam escaped from both swords as the swordsman stopped. Breathing heavily, beads of sweat beading his forehead, the sun pillar stared at his surprised opponent. Oh. That was wonderful. Ryuji clapped as if he just watched a play. Naruto kept his eyes fixed on the demon. Who taught you that exotic sword dance? Your abusive parents or your loving but dead parents? Ryuji didn't see the danger in that defensive technique. Like many before him, they didn't see it as an offensive move that could kill them, that could end a demon's life. But Naruto's parents and his clan were never particularly orthodox hunters and followed their own paths, their own way of the sword. I'm going to stop laughing. The blood surged, shooting toward the demon and stopping a couple of meters away, beginning to coalesce into a spear. Let's see what that dance can do. I want to see you show me your strength. The enormous bloody spear shot toward its target with a single signal from its summoner. Sword dance. Naruto crossed both arms in front of him, forming an X with his swords. Two-sword style. The muscles in his legs grew slightly. His clothes began to tear. Ascending crow cross. The spear collided directly with the point where both swords joined, generating sparks that obscured the vision of the demon who, meters behind, watched as his blood weapon attempted to engulf the sun pillar. The crunch of breaking steel. The spear shattered, and a hole the size of a thumb appeared in the swordsman's left shoulder. Shit. Naruto looked at both swords in his possession. Due to the force used, the blades had begun to fragment, although the pieces still remained together, forming the weapon. Amazing, the spear formed again, to Ryuji's right. It's incredible what a pillar can accomplish, isn't it? Congratulations, kid. You've got my interest. A fragment of the sword has passed cleanly through my left shoulder. Perhaps it has fallen into the street. He examined both swords, finding the small gap left by the fragment that had caused the wound, though it wasn't completely serious. He'd fought in worse conditions, and it was only a scratch to him. However, for everything to go according to my teacher's plan, I must end this game with you. Die. Sword dance. Naruto threw the sword in his left arm into the air. One sword style. He wrapped both hands around the katana's handle, standing firmly in place. Sword of King Enma. The sword in the air shattered into 1,000 fragments, causing small flashes. Naruto gritted his teeth at the same time and swung the katana in his hands in a completely vertical motion, slicing through the blood spear and severing Ryuji's left arm with that motion. Behind the demon, however, a massive gash was created that split the ground in two and several buildings in a straight line. Shit. I knew I wouldn't last. The katana in his hand shattered into tiny fragments, just like the sword he'd thrown into the air. Naruto swung his left arm, catching only the handle of the other sword, now bladeless. That was amazing, Ryuji, in front of the swordsman, had begun to regenerate the left side of his body, but it was completely insufficient. The wave of the arm. 100 reddish needles shot out at their target. That's nothing. Using the fragment still floating in the air after its movement, the sun pillar began to jump, gaining height, evading the needles. He flexed his legs. He looked at his target. He crossed his arms in front of him, forming a perfect X. Sword dance. You don't have any blades to cut me with. Slowly, a dozen spears began to form. Do sword style. Die at once. Ryuji swung his arm, ordering his spears to pierce through the target. At the same time, Naruto shot toward his opponent. Dragon's horn. Before Ryuji's wide eyes, Naruto evaded the spears by moving through the air, preventing them from passing through him and moving directly towards him. Die. Ryuji tried to stop the spears, to make them move in reverse. A second later, he felt his body being cut and saw blood pouring from his chest. Why you're not going to kill me like that? Why you need to? Sword dance. Naruto spun on his right foot and twisted his body, guiding both swords in a single direction. Ryuji's neck. Two-sword style. The small Nichiren edge left on the blades touched the demon's neck. Ryuji couldn't stay on his feet, crashing to the ground from the hunter's force. Descending full moon. Spinning like a screw, Naruto sliced the demon's head in one perfect motion and cuts, slicing its neck and severing the head without remorse or consideration, giving the unmistakable impression that he had done this before. Crouching beside the demon's body, Naruto watched Ryuji's final moments. Ryuji just stared, feeling himself fading away, disappearing like hundreds of demons before him. But before he could do so completely, Ryuji dedicated his final words to the hunter who had killed him. You're truly what even she isn't. A true demon, he laughed dryly. I don't regret anything, boy. I don't regret having been immortal for a time, with power greater than that of a human. But you? You're the demon within humans, the beast, the wolf in sheep's clothing. Hahaha. She's really going to find this a good joke. Seeking to create the perfect demon, and it already exists. There was no reaction from the pillar. Muzin killed him, the most important man in my master's life. And she only wanted to follow her father's instructions. There are more, hundreds perhaps, after your head if you pursue her. But, still, you're the devil. Finally, Ryuji faded into ashes. Chapter 10. The rain had begun to fall seconds after Ryuji's head had disappeared into ash, leaving no trace of his presence, of his time in the world. Even standing, unconcerned with the rain, the sun pillar remained in place, its eyes fixed on the spot where its enemy's body had been. Not even the ashes had lasted long. The wind had carried them away, cleaning the area and spreading the blood between the roof tiles, causing the liquid to disappear. The swordsman's eyes remained fixed on the spot where Ryuji's body had been. The memory of his last words remained fresh in his mind. He had called him demon before fading away completely. It had been 7 or 8 years since anyone had called him that. It had brought back bitter memories of a dark time in his life, but one that had ended with a light in his life. Big strands of hair fell onto his forehead, cold from the rain. His hands gripped the handle of each of the swords tightly. The blade was gone. It had been shattered, completely broken, and scattered across the battlefield, leaving no trace. There was no wound on Naruto's body. Blood had stained his Haori and his hunter's uniform. There were cuts in the fabric, there were marks where the bloody needles had cut the clothes, but there was no wound, and the dried blood was the only reminder of the wounds, as Naruto hadn't registered them in his mind. He raised his face, allowing the water to hit his skin. He felt, in a way, clean and at the same time dirty. He had held back against Ryuji, against his clumsy movements. He had only used his strength to destroy him, to end the demon's vain existence, and he had obtained certain information necessary to end the trafficking of the substance that turned dying people into demons. There was a woman behind Ryuji's conversion to everything that seemed to be happening in the city. Could that same woman be behind the disappearances? The three pillars had gone to the city and the feudal lord's court for two reasons. One was the escort mission and to discover the traitor within the court of the governor of Kyoto. The second reason was to discover the disappearances and the increase in the appearance of demons in Japan without knew the reason until now. The lead Ryuji had given them was too broad, encompassing thousands of women living in the country. This would only be narrowed down if they discovered what relationship the woman had with Muzan, and the only one Naruto knew was Tomeo, the demon doctor who was confronting Muzan in her own way. Could it be Tomeo who is converting them? Tomeo's grudge against Muzan was too great. The woman had been one of the first demons created and had, miraculously, severed her connection to Muzan, thanks to the only demon hunter the Demon King feared, the creator of sun breathing. But Naruto doubted Tomeo was the one responsible for Ryuji's transformation. She wouldn't just disappear people for no reason. All those centuries he'd been working to confront Muzan and finally defeat him. It wouldn't be likely because of her work to reverse the demonization of people. She's worked to eliminate demons, to prevent this from spreading too far. Tomeo was suspicious, and at the same time, she wasn't. There were too many inconsistencies, but she was the only female demon who could turn others into demons, as was the case with Yushiro, the only companion Naruto had ever met in Tomeo. We have to prevent this from spreading, from growing. The train of thought was cut short by a soft, warm touch. Before the swordsman could say anything, he felt slender arms wrap around his neck and pull him back slightly. He didn't fall or move from his spot. His body only leaned back slightly, but he remained upright. He felt something hit his back and then noticed something around his waist. The peck on his cheek further clarified who the person was. When the swordsman turned his head to the right, enormous purple eyes were staring at him with the same intensity as always, glowing with joy at seeing him completely healed and recovered from any injury. The dwarf runs too fast. Seconds after Shinobu arrived at the area, Tsunemi appeared, showing irritation at having been left behind by his companion and completely forgotten by both pillars, who were now looking at each other with a certain devotion. "It's not my fault you're slow, Tsunemi." Shinobu stuck her tongue out at the wind pillar, earning a gnashing of teeth from her companion. "You'd never be able to catch a butterfly." They both looked at each other. Mockery shone in the girl's eyes, while anger seemed to grow in the boy's. Naruto spun around, dropping his shattered Nichiren, and grabbed Shinobu by the waist, placing her on the ground, as if she were nothing more than a doll to him. He then pointed at his two companions and waited patiently for them to understand. "We weren't able to find out much," Tsunemi admitted. Her voice sounded frustrated, and her eyes reflected that sentiment. Apparently, Ryuji was being seen by a doctor who was too well known in Kyoto's red light districts. There have been too many disappearances in those neighborhoods, and not exactly the escorts. Another group of hunters had gone to a specific red light district to search for the wives of the Pillar of Sound. That man was extravagant even in his relationships, having a harem of 3 wives who accompanied him on missions. Although it seemed that the Pillar had recently lost all contact with his companions. These disappearances seemed to be related to the increase in strange deaths that have been happening lately, Shinobu murmured, looking at the shattered swords, the remains of the blade completely pulverized. She had only seen that on one other occasion, a truly traumatic one. "We should inform the boss. Maybe we should send some hunters after this matter. We can't let more demons be created. They're not like the upper moons, but there is something strange, right, Whiskers-kun?" Naruto looked back at where Ryuji's body had been. He had restrained his own strength and been forced to use his own style. But he never felt threatened by the fledgling demon. The demon blood technique hadn't been too powerful to consider Ryuji a danger, at least not with the time he'd been a demon, perhaps a few years. But what he could admit was the strange force behind him, as if he were somehow different from the demons he'd met. Akaza was much more dangerous, so why did I feel the need to eliminate him completely? Maybe he's behind this too. Maybe we should take charge. I don't know what he thinks. The wind pillar's right thumb pointed directly at Naruto, but this is our case. We have the clues, we're pillars, and we have to make our move to put an end to this problem. I think we're the right people. We've already worked as a team, haven't we? Team? I think Bigot did it all. Shinobu's smile grew at Tsunemi's growing anger. The girl was prodding him, striking at his classmates' pride with her words, and she was following suit. Tsunemi was very temperamental and short-tempered. In a way, he reminded her of the old Naruto, the boy she'd seen covered in blood, with rags covering his body and a blank stare. Thinking back made Shinobu look at the blonde boy fondly. Naruto had a childhood all too similar to that of Kanao, his younger adoptive sister. They shared many similarities, many attitudes. The difference between them was how they survived a situation of losing everything, even their home. While Kanao grew up with a degree of autism, Naruto grew up with the inability to speak, to express his emotions, and with both psychological and physical scars that he couldn't erase. Naruto's response to Shinobu and Tsunemi's teasing and fighting was a simple shrug, as if nothing out of the ordinary was happening, and both pillars took this as a normal reaction. Among the pillars, Naruto had formed a much closer relationship with Shinobu and Tsunemi. He might consider the latter to be an overly explosive brother who could barely control his temper if pushed too hard. But Naruto found him extremely entertaining. He had left him with fond memories that, in a way, he treasured. We should fix all this, Shinobu scanned the area, widening her eyes slightly as she saw the destruction caused by one of Naruto's moves. There were buildings split in two. A completely perfect and flawless movement, with a cut so clean that there were no imperfections in the cut walls or shattered glass. That had only happened twice that Shinobu could remember. On one of those occasions, 8 years ago, the demon wasn't killed by the movement, but the sword was completely pulverized. What? The wind pillar's eyes widened slightly at the destruction caused by the sword movement. Buck me. Who the hell did this? Tsunemi wasn't surprised by the destruction during the confrontation. He was surprised by the precision of the cut, by the perfection of destroying a house without leaving any imperfections in the cut, as if he were a surgeon. Naruto looked down at the handles of his katanas. His family's style was powerful, full of brute force and precision. They had been samurai for centuries, a fighting force always dedicated to the precepts of the way of the sword they knew as the 9 laws. And from a young age, he learned to follow in the footsteps of his ancestors, who were, loosely, related to sun breathing. We don't have much time to investigate, Shinobu looked away from the perfect destruction. We must return to the boss and report. We must go after this trafficking and the increase in demons. We can't. The bird's cry interrupted the girl's words. The 3 pillars looked up at the sky, watching the beautiful feathers of an eagle descend toward them. Naruto raised his arm. The bird landed delicately, careful not to scratch its companion's arm. Priya. Hey. Tsunemi took a step forward. Don't tell me Uzui. The eagle flew off again. When Shinobu and Tsunemi looked over, Naruto was no longer with them. Chapter 11. The ruins lay in ruins, with columns of smoke and dust rising from the collapsed buildings. Hundreds of injured people lay among the rubble, staring in disbelief at what was happening before their eyes, unable to fully believe it or see the truth that their eyes and minds were registering. Right in front of them, a man was fighting a monster, using 2 swords to try to reach the creature's head, but it didn't seem worried. The man facing him was reaching his limit and his companions couldn't move. There was no explanation that people could accept as plausible what they were witnessing. The swordsman was moving in a superhuman manner, surpassing the speed an ordinary human could achieve, outpacing the monster in fractions of a second. But said monster was unharmed, while the human had wounds, some cuts, poisoning growing from his limbs, and possibly some shattered bones. No ordinary person could stand with the injuries the swordsman was displaying. Lying on his back, unable to get up, Tanjiro watched the confrontation, unable to move his mouth to speak. The demon they were facing, Upper Moon 6, had pierced him below his lower jaw, preventing him from moving his mouth due to the pain. The injuries caused by the confrontation with the Upper Moon's sister, and the same ones inflicted by Gyutaro, prevented him from getting up and grabbing his sword, which was a few inches from his hand. He could touch it with his fingers, he could at least try. The Yoshiwara district had been under the surveillance of the Sound Pillar's 3 wives. Maguekio, Suma and Hinata in an attempt to obtain information about the Upper Moon, located in the district's red light district. The disappearance of the 3 women and the loss of contact forced the pillar to move towards the Yoshiwara district, accompanied by the 3 rookies. Tanjiro, Inosuke and Zenitsu. The 3 had already faced an Upper Moon and a Lower Moon, so they were ready for the mission, although various tweaks had to be made so that no one would suspect them. Uzui-san. If I could help him. Tanjiro tried to move for the 10th time, but his body didn't respond to what his mind wanted, to what his brain was telling him. For the 10th time, he fell face first onto the ground, unable to do anything but press his lips together, feeling the burning pain of the wound Gyutaro had caused when he pierced his lower jaw. And the situation only seemed to get worse. The poison was running and pushing Tenjin Uzui's body to the limit, which, added to the lack of blood and the loss of his hand, were causing the pillar to move more and more erratically, missing more slashes, being the target of Gyutaro's movements, who was taking advantage of this to kill the hunter in the shortest time possible, making him his target with an obscene smile. Even though Tanjiro had trouble seeing Tenjin or Gyudaro's movements due to their speed, he could tell the shinobi was in trouble, being pressured. From his position, he could see the poison rising up the pillar's body, its arms turning slightly purple, and part of its face turning the same color. He wasn't a pessimist, but Tenjin was in real trouble. Zenitsu? The lightning swordsman was lying on some rubble, completely unconscious. Is it washing? The boar-headed boy was drowning in his own blood, his wound being tended to by one of Tenjin's women in an attempt to keep him from dying. Nezuko? His sister was moving slowly due to the lack of one of her legs in the confrontation with Gyudaro's sister, Daki, whom they were finally able to kill by cutting off her head and erasing her existence. Although this very thing seemed to have given Gyudaro renewed strength. Uzui-san. In a bad move caused by the combination of poison, lack of blood, and exhaustion, Tenjin was impaled by one of Gyudaro's bloody blades. The demon then flashed a malicious, sly smile. If he made another move, he could split the pillar completely in two. You don't even dream about it. Using the only sword he had, Tenjin cut Gyudaro's hand and fell to his knees, spitting blood. His vision had begun to blur, and his body had begun to feel heavy, as if it weighed a ton. His muscles didn't seem to want to respond to what his head was asking. Upper Moon 6 didn't seem bothered by the loss of his right arm. He looked at the fallen Tenjin and took the severed arm and put it back in place, all the while staring at the pillar with a look of pure hatred. My sister died because of you. Do you really expect to defeat me? The relationship between Daki and Gyudaro dates back at least a century. The two siblings grew up together, suffered together, and were turned into demons at the same time, holding the position of Upper Moon 6 at the same time, and as a two-demon team that pushed the hunters to their limits. Though he didn't express it, Gyudaro cared for his sister, the same one who had been murdered before his eyes without remorse. Gyudaro was already powerful. He had speed comparable to Tenjin's, and he had proven it. His strength was superior to that of ordinary demons. And his blood technique was powerful if pushed in the right direction. However, knowing of Daki's death, his strength had increased at least twofold, surpassing Tenjin and any hunter present. And unlike them, Gyudaro felt no fatigue that could diminish his abilities. He was always full of energy. NGH. I'm going to end you like you ended my sister. I'm going to end your lives. Uzui-san. No. Tanjiro screamed in his own mind, but the three adult women who shared the shinobi's life screamed loudly when they saw the scythe coming down directly towards their husband's head, making the ears of anyone who heard them ring. The tight grip on the demon's wrist halted the blade's advance. Gyudaro tried to break free, but found himself unable to end the life of the pillar at his feet. When he raised his head, he felt his teeth being yanked out of place by a right hook he couldn't dodge. When he tried to strike back, he was thrown to the right, landing 20 meters away from the pillar and the man with the scarf. Naruto-san. Naruto slowly squatted down in front of Tenjin. Grabbing the sound pillar, he leaped away from the upper moon as it emerged from the rubble, gently placing the shinobi next to his wives. You. Raising his arm, Gyudaro pointed at the sun pillar and showed his annoyance, which shone in his yellowish demonic eyes. Replacing the scarf over his face, Naruto stood up and began walking towards Gyudaro, passing between the downed young hunters and Nezuko, who looked at the pillar directly behind him, seeing something strange between the scratches on his clothes. Who are you? The Haori fell to the floor with a thud. The blue eyes stared into Gyudaro's yellow ones. For a second, Upper Moon 6 felt a chill run down his spine. You bastard son of a bitch. Sword dance, the demon blinked in surprise. Non-sword style, overcoming Gyudaro's reaction, Naruto slipped under his opponent's defense. Rising Dragon Strike. The jab went straight for the demon's stomach. By the time Gyudaro realized what was happening, the sun pillar's right arm was impaling him through and through, blood dripping from the limb used to strike him. He stomped hard, slightly bending the leg he'd used as support. Naruto leaped up and slammed Gyudaro's head down hard, sending the demon tumbling into a pile of rubble. When the dust settled, the sight of the impaled Upper Moon 6 was a welcome sight for Tenjin Uzui's wives. Blue eyes stared at the impaled form of his opponent. There was no other gesture beyond that stare, as if a similar image had already occurred before him. Do you think this is funny? Using his strength, Gyudaro freed himself from the wooden stakes, landing on his own feet. The wound slowly began to close. You little bastard. The blood-formed scythes moved toward their target. Naruto crouched, his legs slightly bent. When the projectiles came within range, he leaped and moved through them like a gazelle, advancing on Gyudaro and slamming his knee into the demon's face, sending him flying several meters, his nose shattered. NHG. Gyudaro shook his head and tried to focus his mind on his enemy, but it was impossible. Just when it seemed like this was about to happen, another blow landed and made him take another step back. Enough. Enough of this. The scythes extended, tearing through the Uzumaki's hunter uniform. I'm going to take you a little more seriously. I'm going to exterminate your life like yours ended my sister's. And then they'll come without you being able to do anything. Gyutaro leaped over Naruto. He extended both arms, pointing at the hunter, and the blood formed into scythes that rained down upon the swordsman, enveloping him in an immense cloud of dust and debris that hid him from the sight of all the spectators and even the upper moon. Heh. The dust slowly faded. Gyutaro fell to his feet, his back to his enemy as if he were dead, although that was what Gyutaro himself had expected. You're not going to. By levering his right leg and twisting his body to an unorthodox degree for a human, Naruto hooked Gyutaro's head and slammed him into the ground, landing on top of him, casting his shadow onto the upper moon. What is that on your back? Maguekio, one of Tenjin's wives, observed the Uzumaki's back, which, due to Gyutaro's abusive attack, had been completely exposed along with the rest of his torso, revealing something engraved on the young hunter. Demon, is that it? Suma, another of the Pillar's wives, squinted. The smoke, fire, and dust made it difficult for them to see clearly from a distance. Yes, that's exactly it. And Itsuru, the third wife, reaffirmed with her shout, pointing at the kanji engraved on the skin of the Sun Pillar. Why would someone engrave that on their body? Then Naruto-sensei. Tanjiro lightly touched the handle of his katana, dropping the limb as he couldn't grasp it, despite it being within reach of his own hand, feeling the frustration of not being able to help the one who was his master, his partner as a hunter. Lying on the ground, Gyutaro summoned his blood scythes, wrapping them around his limbs. They extended and forced Naruto to jump back, leaving slight cuts on his arms as he covered his face with them. Throughout history, there had been hunters with the strength to hold a demon in place until the sun appeared over the horizon. The rock pillar had been one such hunter, keeping the demon at bay with its blows until the sun turned it to ash that faded over time. But none of the demons had been a demon moon, much less an upper moon like Gyutaro. With each blow, Naruto felt his fists and arms shudder. Aren't you using a sword? Aren't you trying to cut my throat? A sly smile spread across the demon's face. You won't be able to stop me with simple blows. Naruto looked at his knuckles. Blood glistened on them, dripping to the ground and disappearing into the gravel and rubble. It's surprising your arms aren't shattered, with splintered bones. You must be an exceptional human if you still have limbs despite being human. Gyutaro moved forward. The hunter's eyes followed his opponent's movements, and when the upper moon's right arm moved, he evaded the movement by slipping between the upper moon's two arms, right in front of his opponent's face. Before the demon could react, a headbutt from the swordsman sent him sprawling back onto the ground, blood running down his fractured forehead. Naruto didn't seem bothered or hurt by the blow. Slowly, the skin on his forehead had begun to turn pink, showing a more vibrant color, despite having a tan that obscured the pinkness caused by the head blow. Why, you're very annoying. The swordsman's foot came down as Gyutaro tried to move. A grotesque sound accompanied the demon's mute surprise. His jaw was shattered and blood gurgled as the upper moon tried to speak, finding this activity impossible for a few moments. Could you treat me a little better? Naruto jerked his head to the right as Gyutaro's attack tried to pierce through him. Or at least show some fear. Gyutaro wasn't going to admit it, but he was the one who was afraid. No human in the century he'd been alive had ever managed to draw a drop of blood from him using only their own physical strength, and yet this guy was humiliating him, beating him with only his fists, as if he were a lesser demon, as if he were nothing. Anger began to boil inside Gyutaro. The upper moon moved his arms and guided his attack with the intensity to pierce through the swordsman's body. But again he found himself striking at nothing, missing his opponent's body, and once again he received a stomp from the Uzumaki, causing his head to sink into the ground. Bastard. Naruto evaded his opponent's movements for the third time. And for the third time, he slammed the demon's head into the ground with a powerful stomp. I've had enough, Gyutaro's eyes flashed with anger. I'm going to end what's left of your life, human. At first, he treated the new hunter as a mere toy, someone to have fun with while seeing the desperation in his eyes, just like with Tenjin. But this new hunter wasn't someone he could trifle with. He had speed comparable to the Sound Pillar and strength superior to any of the hunters present. Gyutaro had learned not to underestimate him. Forming around the demon's arms, waves of blood acted at the summoner's command, slashing in different directions with the intention of cutting his opponent in two or several pieces. Naruto reacted quickly to the upper moon's movement. He jumped back and shifted his body to the side, allowing two slashes to fly past him. As his feet touched the ground, he ducked to avoid a third slash, but couldn't avoid the fourth. Trapped and lacking perfect mobility, Naruto simply raised his arms and was pushed back several meters by the slashing wave. He revealed two deep cuts, one on each arm, from which blood began to drip. The swordsman's blue eyes shifted toward the demon. Gyutaro seemed pleased to have struck and cut his opponent, mockery showing in his eyes and smile. The Uzumaki took a step forward, noticing the Nichiren katana on the ground. He slowly bent down and wrapped his fingers around the handle, observing the sword's black blade. Tanjiro's katana. You shouldn't get distracted. A third attack shot out from the upper moon, traveling the meters that separated the hunter and the demon, and reaching the former with the intention of tearing it to pieces. The Nichiren moved. It deflected the right slash, then the left wave, and sliced the central wave in two, shattering it to pieces. Without showing a single dent, the katana swung from right to left, slicing through each slashing wave that emerged from Gyuto's arms, which would have been capable of slicing him into cubes of flesh. He stepped firmly. He gripped the handle of the Nichiren with both hands. He fixed his eyes on Gyuto's figure and intensified his gaze, as if trying to paralyze him with his instinct, which seemed to happen. Sword danced beneath the tattered sleeves of his uniform, the sun pillar's muscles swelled slightly. One sword style he exhaled as he propelled himself forward, dodging two more slashes from the upper moon. Cultural threat of fate. Gyutaro moved. Naruto guided the sword following his opponent's movement. He planted his left foot and spun 360 degrees when it seemed the upper moon managed to evade the movement. Instead of cutting off his head, Naruto cut Gyuto's waist, surprising him, splitting him in two, and leaving him unable to move until he regenerated or joined his lower body. Son of a bitch. Dust accompanied the swordsman's movement. His chest sank and his shoulders slumped as all the air left his lungs. Holding his sword outstretched, crossed at his right side, Naruto peered through his thick strands of hair at the figure of Upper Moon 6. The scar fluttered slightly in the wind. Aren't you going to say anything? The demon's eyes widened slightly when he saw the cut on the swordsman's neck. That ugly scar came into view when Naruto lowered the scarf. It's you. It's you. Gripping the katana's handle tightly, Naruto brought the sword down, with the speed and force necessary to sever the demon's head, bringing it to its death. Chapter 12. The calm after the storm left hundreds injured, homes destroyed, and businesses turned into rubble and dust, shrouded in the dark smoke of the fire, and accompanied by the warm ashes that had turned into the rain that accompanied the final moment of Upper Moon 6's life, and the change in the lives of those who lived and worked in the Yoshiwara district, as the existence of beings beyond the known had been exposed to the survivors of the incident. To the people hidden in the rubble who watched the confrontation. To the cowards who fled, leaving their loved ones behind. The train incident had been a minor incident compared to the destruction that had occurred in Yoshiwara, and those affected by the fight between the hunters and the demons, being an event that was going to mark hundreds of people, perhaps thousands of them, either for having witnessed the incident or for having a relative who had suffered in it. The imperial family had tried, by every means, to keep the existence of demons and the work carried out by some of its samurai, as members of the Demon Extermination Corps, a secret. But in 250 years, only 3 incidents had occurred that shook the foundations of the country's politics and beliefs. 2 of them were the train incident and the current one at Yoshiwara. The third incident had happened 13 years ago, when a samurai clan dedicated to protecting the imperial family was exterminated in a bloody scene. When the allies went to see what had happened, they found a scene that no one wanted to repeat in words. But 3 incidents in a short period of time that gave the demons a presence. The hunters were going to have to move swiftly to hide any evidence, and every imperial communique would have to be sent in a threat, wrapped in blood. Naruto stabbed Tanjiro Kamado's mangled sword into the ground. Using his left hand, he pulled off the remains of his upper uniform, revealing his muscular, trained, and tanned torso, marked by scars. The enormous scar on his back was immediately visible to onlookers. Not only did Tenjin's wives see the kanji for demon etched into his skin, but both civilians and lower-ranking hunters could see this in vivid detail, as well as the lack of wounds on his arms. Naruto had received a cut that pierced almost to the bone on both of his forearms when he protected himself from an attack by Gyutaro. However, the cut had not remained. When Naruto ended the life of Upper Moon 6, without showing remorse, the wound on his body had vanished without a trace, leaving no scar to keep company with the one on his back. This image was seared into the retina and mind of Tenjin Uzui, the Pillar of Sound. As a man trained in the arts of ninjutsu and having outlived his brothers to become a shinobi, a shadow assassin, he knew only too well the only man with such a kanji on his back and represented him perfectly, for he was the only human with abilities that only a demon could possess. No. There's no way that boy could be him. Tenjin was confused and suspicious. Despite his senses dulled by the poison and lack of blood, he could still process what was happening before his eyes, and it was something completely impossible for him. How could a young man of about 18 or 17 be the demon? Someone that age must have started killing at a very young age. I refuse to believe that boy was put in that situation. The shinobi tried to get up, but his handcuffs held him still despite his constant protests and complaints. He wanted to approach the boy, try to speak to him in a more friendly way, but it was impossible. He also understood this when he saw his gestures, the naturalness of the predator moving around his prey. Calling him demon wasn't something that would affect him, and he understood. He's grown up with it and accepted it as part of himself, part of his life. It would be too late to try to support him emotionally. Tenjin understood it in a second and resigned himself, being pushed by his handcuffs against the ground almost the second Izuku touched his body, enveloping him in a flame that vanished any trace of the poison that had been in his system. What will you do now? Abanai is standing over Tenjin, sitting on a pile of rubble. His eyes are on the sun pillar, analyzing it, understanding its patterns. I can think about retiring. Even without someone to take my place, this generation has a star that shines like the sun itself. Is that a compliment that doesn't go to you? Mockery was implicit in the question. You're slowly improving as a person, Tenjin. Buck off, Snake Boy. Various members of the Extermination Corps had begun to appear on the scene, caring for the wounded, whether they belonged to the organization or were simple civilians affected by the confrontation against the upper moon. Maybe you'll end up like Rengoku. Displaying a face of complete innocence, Shinobu named the flame pillar, which was currently incapacitated from its duties. Although it seemed that her companion had recently returned to his sword training routines, perhaps hoping for a miracle. TCH. I only lost one eye and one hand. I can still use the other eye and the other hand. But it's not like you're going to be able to do much. Sanemi appeared on the scene, staring at his partner's back. You're only halfway there with one hand. In another fight, you'd die. It was surprising that Tenjin had survived the poison and the fight against Gyutaro, and he himself was surprised by his own endurance, although he had to admit that adrenaline and desperation took up too much of a place in his mind. I won't fight again. Tenjin looked at his one intact hand. He and Rengoku had been the only pillars to receive injuries that disabled them from their duties. Usually, a pillar only left their position when they died. The odds of surviving with serious injuries were even lower than surviving with minor injuries. If it weren't for Naruto, we probably would have all ended up dead. Is this the power of the upper moons, of the demon moons? To become a pillar, one had to complete certain requirements. Kill 50 demons or kill a demon moon, the most loyal followers within the ranks of Muzan, the demon king who was ravaging Japan with his presence. But the current demon moons were too strong for them, and Tenjin experienced it firsthand, etching the memory into his mind and body. Rengoku was injured by Upper Moon 3, and I was injured by Upper Moon 6, who was accompanied by his sister, who acted as a second Upper Moon 6. I don't want to imagine how powerful Upper Moon 1 or the rest of the demon moons under Muzan's control must be. Will we be strong enough to survive them? Or simply. Whiskers-kun. Shinobu cupped her hands around her mouth to amplify her scream, which seemed to do the trick. Slowly, Naruto turned to face the pillars present, sending them a calm gaze that intensified when the scarf covered the lower part of his face again. He's weird, admitted one of Tenjin's wives. We've already seen his torso. What does it matter if we see his face? Maguekio. He really won't let you see his face. The insect pillar placed the fingertips of both hands together. His confidence isn't high enough for that. He's suspicious, and I'd say that behavior was pushed by many people. Have you seen his face? Of course. Otherwise, how could I kiss him, Maguekio? Shinobu had admitted to kissing Naruto and showed a slight blush of embarrassment that disappeared after a few seconds. It wasn't as if she minded letting them know she was with her classmate, but she wasn't exactly letting them know about her personal life. I saw it too. The eyes of the pillars moved towards Sanemi. What? I've known him for a while. Why do you think I went to Kyoto with him and the dwarf, you idiots? Did you discover anything important? Abanai and the rest of the pillars knew about the mission the boss had entrusted to the three. The disappearance of sick children and some teenagers had been spreading through the slums. Someone is creating demons, and it's not Muzan. That woman's approach to creating demons was different from Muzan's, and Ryuji himself was an example of that, if you ask Sanemi. This situation is slowly becoming more complex, and we don't have enough pillars to deal with it. I highly doubt the average hunters can handle what's coming. They'd been after Muzan for the past half-century or so, but now another player had appeared on the board and the circumstances were ripe for the era of humans to come to a complete end, or at least, if you ask the most pessimistic of the group. For the rest, it was just another target to eliminate, one they'd be chasing for another 500 years. I want to see how the boss and the imperial family sort out this chaos. The pillars were not exempt from the country's information and laws, nor from the government's denial of the existence of supernatural beings, those that could cause nightmares in young children and fear in adults. And the destruction of an entire district was very difficult to conceal, if not completely impossible. Naruto arrived in front of his companions, clutching Tanjiro's jagged sword in his right hand. Cracks had appeared on the blade due to the extreme force he used to cut Gyutaro in two, and then his head. You're going to get sick. Shinobu delicately placed her own haori over her companion's body. He grabbed a fabric and secured it over his torso, covering himself as much as possible and concealing the scar on his back that was now exposed. I've never seen him sick. Sanemi looked suspiciously at his companion, earning a flat stare from the Uzumaki. Don't look at me like that, bastard. I'm going to punch your smug face in. Bastard. Laughter erupted. It was a moment of peace within a vortex of chaos. Chapter 13. The moon had been covered by the dark rains of a storm, and the spring wind was replaced by the fierce gale force winds of a thunderstorm. The hunters injured in the confrontation with Upper Moon 6 were sent to the Butterfly Estate under the care of Shinobu and her companions just before the onset of the storm, the same storm that had extinguished the fire that had flooded the streets of Yoshiwara and injured hundreds of people. Reconstruction of the district would begin when the storm subsided, which could take all night or even days if it was truly persistent and strong as expected. Although sometimes the strongest storms were also the shortest lived, sometimes lasting only hours. In one of the main rooms of Finca Mariposa, a young man stood bare-chested, wearing only tattered dark pants. His hair, resembling a lion's mane, rested on its owner's shoulders, swaying wildly in the wind as if he saw no danger. In the young man's hands was an old letter that was quite old. This could be seen in the wrinkled and yellowed paper, as if it had been written a decade or more ago. A name was handwritten on the back of the letter. Naruto Uzumaki. That letter was written by young Naruto's mother when he was only 5 years old, if the swordsman remembered correctly. It was that same letter that kept him alive during the worst years of his life, the darkest a person could ever experience. Although he had to thank his mother's memory for that as well. Without her, he would likely have perished from the mistreatment and abuse of his owners. Raising his head for a few seconds, Naruto was able to capture the silvery moonlight that managed to filter through the dense curtain of clouds that covered it for a few seconds. It was beautiful and warm. Or at least as warm as the moon could be. Then arms appeared around the boy's neck. They wrapped around him, and Shinobu's body pressed against his companion's back. They remained silent for minutes, as they had so often. It could have been somewhat annoying and tedious, but Shinobu found it comforting, at least almost as much as imagining Naruto's voice coming from her lips. And even though it was impossible, she loved imagining her partner's voice and hearing it in her mind. What would it be like? Guttural, husky, soft, or watery? There were different voices, and thinking of one for Naruto could take hours, even days. Shinobu did it as a hobby, a pastime she took up almost the day she met him, when she saw him soaked in blood, with that lost look in his eyes. At that time, Shinobu believed Naruto's voice would be that of a lunatic, a true psychopath who loved blood enough to bathe in it. But over time, she changed that idea and modified it, understanding what the young man she met shortly before her older sister's death was really like. Demon, some who knew him had called him, who knew about his past, or who had hired him for some of the worst jobs in the underworld. Shinobu couldn't believe that this same boy was the one who had sat with Kanao to help her process Kani's death despite her injuries, the wounds inflicted by the demon who killed her older sister. The same man whom many dubious people called a demon was willing to die and save Kani when no one else was. He was willing to throw away his future for someone who was dying, who was beyond saving. Shinobu knew the story. Her sister died, and the only one who was there and knew the demon's identity was Naruto. But she didn't hold a grudge against him for having survived and her sister having died. How could she? Naruto brought his sister's hair ornament, the same one Kanao was now wearing, although it was a simpler ornament and not a double one. And it was also Naruto who repaired said ornament for Kanao. Demon wasn't a word that could define Naruto Uzumaki, the Sun Pillar. Not for Shinobu or Kanao, at least, who saw certain traits in the swordsman that others didn't. But the enemies at the other end of the pillar's sword didn't need to know of his kindness or what he was willing to do for others, as long as it was within his power. It's surprising how you can bear to let us see this. Shinobu's pale hand brushed back the hair that fell down the Uzumaki's back. Slowly, she began to trace the kanji engraved on his back, feeling the relief of the scar. Demon. I know you can't speak, but even I can see that this is a mockery of what you truly are. Shinobu had never encountered anything in Naruto that bothered him so much, that hurt him. They'd known each other for at least 8 years, if she remembered correctly, and she could never see him upset by something like that, by a simple word associated with her. But in a way, I like it. You've proven to everyone who's ever pointed fingers at you that you're not a demon, even though you've done things even worse than those you claim to be a demon. Shinobu's lips ran kiss after kiss over the entire scar without pausing, without lifting her head. She did so delicately, leaving warm touches on the swordsman's skin as he closed his eyes, leaving his face at the mercy of the wind and the raindrops that reached him. Neither of them remembered the date of their first kiss, their first caress, their first sigh, or their first night together. It was before Kani's death that they had kissed for the first time, beneath the sakura leaves that drifted slowly in the gentle spring breeze. Their first kiss was accompanied by their first caress, by their first dreamy, life-filled look. It was also their first intimate embrace, allowing their feelings to envelop them, despite who they were and what might happen. The hunters had short lives. Many didn't live past 30, and those who did left no descendants to continue their legacy of death. They were focused solely on hunting demons, and love wasn't among their priorities. This was why they both kept their relationship strictly secret, pushing their feelings aside for a time. But they couldn't do so for long. Although they both had a revenge, they only got along during their teenage years. "You were there for Kanao." Slowly, the girl ended up sitting on the boy's lap, looking into his eyes, her back, naked, to the moon and the dark clouds, to the storm. "You were there for me when I collapsed in front of my sister's grave." Shinobu slid her hands down Naruto's bare torso. "You've been there for my family through the best and worst of times." The old letter ended up to the side, hidden in the folds of the haori. "And I must do the same after all our." Naruto stopped Shinobu's words and movements. Gently pushing the girl, he had her sitting on his lap again, her back straight and upright, her mouth lightly brushing against his, close enough to entwine their breaths. "What are you doing, Whiskers?" The boy had prevented Shinobu from pushing him to the ground and straddling him, as she had done before. On that occasion, he had prevented the games from going beyond those kisses, caresses, and glances. The letter filled the girl's vision, slightly deflating the spirits with which she had arrived at the room. That letter was written by the last leader of the Uzumaki clan, a samurai clan linked to the imperial family for many centuries, and many clan heads. The family ended in extinction, on the verge of being erased from history, if not for its last member. "It's the letter from your mother that you usually use when you're sad or pensive," the girl murmured, looking at her boyfriend's name on one side of the envelope. "What are you thinking about today, reading this?" That letter was supposed to have been given to Naruto on the day he was considered an adult within his clan, which would be equivalent to reaching 14 years of age in human age, or passing the initiation tests for clan leaders. However, that letter was the last memento his mother gave him moments before her death, when he was still a child of innocence. An innocence tainted by many people, for many moments. "You're not thinking about Tenjin's injuries, are you? You're not thinking about my sister's death or Ringoku's injury, are you?" There weren't any words coming from the swordsman's mouth, but Shinobu saw it in his eyes, in his gaze, in the way his mouth turned slightly downward and his eyes began to glow. And she knew his meaning. She didn't need to be a genius to deduce what he was thinking. It was easy to see what Naruto was thinking, to sense what he wanted to do. He rarely managed to confuse those who had truly seen his way of being, of reacting to different situations. Shinobu, of course, had no problem seeing the emotion surfacing in Naruto's eyes, seeing the sadness and frustration there with an intensity that made it impossible to simply ignore the look. Slowly, Shinobu moved her hands and cupped the swordsman's face in hers. Gently, using her thumbs, she wiped away the tears that trickled down her boyfriend's sunken cheeks, as if they had never existed. Then, giving him a smile, she planted a delicate kiss on Naruto's lips with all the gentleness in the world, as if he would break with that chaste and delicate gesture. "Sometimes we lose track of things so much, we don't realize that even monsters have feelings. It's not like you're a monster, but..." Shinobu's voice faded as Naruto cupped her face, placing his lips on hers with the same gentleness she used on him, the same tender gesture she made for him. Ara. So cute." Shinobu smiled, her rosy cheeks and bright feverish eyes showing openly. Naruto's response was a simple caress, a simple brush on her cheek using his right hand, earning a shudder from the girl, as if a chill had run through her body from her fingertips to her head. I'm a little cold. How about we snuggle up together?" The night had given way to a bright day, with the sun spreading across the green, damp land surrounding the butterfly estate and the outskirts of the demon extermination corps base. There were no clouds present, no signs of the previous night's storm, and the only reminder of the rain was the earth turned to mud, the grass displaying tiny droplets adorning it and glistening as the fine rays pierced it at dawn. Slowly, Shinobu removed the protection of the sheets that had covered her, revealing the feminine curves that formed her body and the pinkish tone of her skin in certain areas, such as her neck, shoulders and buttocks. Whiskers-kun. The girl's purple eyes darted around, searching, trying to find her lover. But she was completely alone in that bed. Naruto had disappeared. "What's that?" She picked up the letter lying next to the pillow, just above the bed. It wasn't the letter Naruto had gotten from his mother. That rough wild handwriting was Naruto's own. Idiot. Chapter 14. The Imperial communique halted speculation about the Yoshiwara district incident and calmed the waters when they began to stir, stopping any repercussions that the incident and the truth behind it could cause to the country's government and the general population. The train incident. The Kyoto incident. The Yoshiwara incident. And another incident years ago, almost 10 years ago. In total, there had been 4 incidents in the last century that all but confirmed the existence of demons and spread fear throughout the country's population. But the imperial family, feudal lords, and hunters all stopped any rumors that might spread throughout the country and cause trouble. Working together, they brought calm to the population. But to maintain calm and allow peace to reign again when people, including children, were disappearing in recent days, it had cost money and many lies that the government spread like the plague. The survivors of each of the incidents had been scattered across the country, separated from any family other than a husband or son, and each person was given a nearly $1 million sum of coins to maintain complete silence or a good piece of land on which to live in peace. Since most of the affected people were peasants or people with a middle-class standard of living, which could be bought with the necessary money or goods, this had left the imperial coffers at a critical point not seen for several decades. This situation had forced the still active pillars to gather together, allowing the wounded from the battle in the Yoshiwara district to rest in the beds at the Mariposa estate, although they had another unexpected casualty. The Sun Pillar. When the pillars were called for an emergency meeting, Shinobu appeared in the room carrying the letter written in the Sun Pillar's own handwriting, which she accompanied with the haori that the blonde used to wear when he worked as a pillar. According to the letter, Naruto had decided to pursue the woman who was creating the demons at his own risk, hoping that none of his other comrades would get hurt, perhaps pursuing a path of revenge. But Shinobu wasn't willing to believe that. Not when the Uzumaki had taken the key to the former Uzumaki clan mansion and her mother's letter. "Don't buck with me." Each of the pillars had taken the news in a completely different way. Sanemi, the pillar of wind, had let out a fit of expletive when he heard the news, staring down at the letter in the boss's hands. "Please, Sanemi. Calm down. This isn't the first time Naruto has simply disappeared. Like the train incident or the Yoshiwara incident, he appeared as if carried by the wind. But he's never ignored orders." The albino spat, staring at the pillar of rock with his eyes bloodshot with rage. "It's not like I care about the glory of killing that bitch, but he's never ignored us." Both Shinobu and Sanemi had worked closely with Naruto. They knew him slightly better than their peers, and the insect pillar could say she knew him on a very intimate level. "It's not like it matters too much." Abanai looked at the letter with disdain and moved his eyes to Sanemi. "We're dealing with something worse than a mad scientist who wants to create a race or a society using her strange experiments. We must deal with Muzan first, and then his imitator." Muzan was a fearsome enemy for the Demon Extermination Corps, and the only one who had been able to kill him was the creator of Sun Breathing, the one who gave them the strength to fight the Demon King's followers in that land. It was only natural that any hunter would prefer to eliminate Muzan rather than a simple rookie who had appeared on the board. "People are disappearing. Just like hundreds of years ago," the Serpent Pillar muttered, looking at Sanemi and Jaime Himejima. "If we're being realistic, we can't waste hunters on such a long search, both in time and territory. The last we heard, it was from his creation, Ryuji. He could be anywhere in the country, or even the world, by now." Sanemi showed his frustration as his lips formed into a thin, almost invisible line. Jaime's eyes held small tears at the meaning of Abanai's words. As hunters, they couldn't leave people to their fate, children, but if they followed a path of reality, they also couldn't face two enemies at the same time. Muzan was outnumbering him, and his demon moons were all they could take at the moment. If they tried to take more, they probably wouldn't even be able to kill Muzan. Leaving those helpless children to the cold and the night, Jaime clasped his hands together. "I can't forgive myself." None of the other pillars said anything. Jaime was a deeply religious person and, as a result, cared deeply for his fellow man despite his blindness. "But I trust Naruto-san and his judgment. He's a good man haunted by the past. I'll leave this mission in his hands and just wait for my partner to finally return with good news," with Muzan's strength diminished. There had to be some connection between the woman who turned people into demons and Muzan. Clearly, the Demon King was giving too much leeway to a stranger with the same ability as him. Turning people into demons, creating an army of monsters. If there was no relationship, none of the pillars could understand why Muzan hadn't eliminated his rival. "You trust him too much," Abanai declared, looking at Jaime. "The boy appeared during the train incident and has taken over 2 upper moons. I won't discredit his skill and strength, but his loyalty. Why does he have the kanji for demon engraved on his back? He could be a slave to Muzan or that woman." "Don't talk nonsense." The eyes of those present shifted toward the door. With one eye covered and one arm bandaged, Tenjin Uzui appeared. "Tenjin. You should rest." Mitsuri Kanroji, the pillar of love, tried to convince his companion to take a break or sit down. But Tenjin strode forward and faced Abanai, looking at him with his one good eye. "Don't mention or talk about him, do you understand? You can't even understand why he has demon engraved on his skin." Tenjin kept his gaze on the serpent pillar before looking at Shinobu, who merely nodded. Probably, in that room, only the two of them knew the truth about part of the Sun Pillar's history. "As a shinobi, I've heard stories of hundreds of murderers. Thousands if we count those before this time, and almost all of them had one thing in common. A nickname." Tenjin looked at Abanai again. "Demon is the nickname, the moniker of a murderer, a swordsman who enjoyed blood, the death of his fellow men. It is said that he was the cause of the death of his family members, a parasite who didn't mind being singled out for it. Memories returned to the injured shinobi's mind like drops of rain. It was said that this murderer, this monster, had the kanji for demon burned into his skin, somewhere on his body, as a reminder of what he was and what he would be in the future. No one knew where on his body he had this scar, but it was certain that he had it, since several witnesses claimed to have seen it, but they also didn't remember where they saw it. And you're telling us that Naruto is this murderer? Of course. I have no doubt it was the demon who haunted the nightmares of hundreds of people and their targets. I myself saw the boy arrive covered in blood after a fight with a real demon, and he didn't even flinch, as if he'd already had a similar bath, as if he was used to it. That image wouldn't leave his mind no matter how hard he tried, and even though Naruto had pointed out at the time that he wasn't used to being covered in blood, he wouldn't have believed it, even if he had been paid to do it. That story is true, Abanai. Kagaya's soft voice halted the dispute among the pillars present. The man looked at everyone, without actually seeing them, and stopped his blind eyes on Tenjin's figure. Tenjin Uzui, former pillar of sound. What I hear in your voice, is that respect for your comrade. It's not that bad, boss. The shinobi muttered through gritted teeth. It's only because I can't imagine the childhood he had, what he had to go through to be with us. He's too willing to give his life just to keep us from getting hurt. Anyone like that has a bit of my admiration. Tenjin's extreme narcissism had led to few people actually being considered his friends or favorites. For him to admit that he respected a fellow student was something you didn't hear every day, and no one could say they'd heard Tenjin say it. It's good to know he has your respect, Tenjin, especially when it was your grandfather who trained him in the ninja arts and shaped his body for the worst situations. What? The pity that the old man died before leaving the boy in the right hands, allowing the boy to grow up alone until the Kacho sisters found him, covered in the blood of some poor bandits who tried to rob him. Within the pillars, the only one who maintained an impassive expression was Shinobu. She and her older sister knew Naruto's story firsthand, a part of his past. There were secrets he hadn't told her yet, and he was hiding countless things she hadn't asked about. But she knew the surface of what her companion went through in his childhood and pre-adolescence until they found him. Although Kagaya hadn't mentioned the reasons why Naruto killed the bandits and kept them to themselves. Naruto Uzumaki is a loner. He's not particularly good at working in company with others and prefers a self-centered fighting style. That's what has given him the astonishing sword skills he now possesses. Kagaya's white, lightless eyes scanned all the pillars present, lingering on the former sound pillar for a few brief seconds. It's no wonder he himself has decided to travel to end the disappearances and find the culprit. Like you, he knows the precarious situation we find ourselves in. We've lost 2 pillars and a portion of the hunters have been eliminated. If we add the events in Kyoto, on the train and in Yashiwara, our credibility with the imperial family and the feudal lords has declined significantly. We're at a critical point that's left us without government funding. Perhaps even the contracts with the feudal lords will be terminated due to the Kyoto case. If this goes on too long, hunters will not be able to receive their regular payments for completed quests, and the demon slaying corps will be on the verge of disbanding. No one said anything to the boss's words. Everyone kept their faces impassive, keeping their thoughts inside their heads, looking for ways to improve their situation. Without the funds the imperial coffers provided the organization, they would soon find themselves in need of loans that wouldn't be easily obtained. Finishing off the woman is the most important thing now. Kagaya ended the meeting with that statement. The desperate, almost agonizing situation they might be in had led one of the pillars to make a desperate decision. What exactly are you up to, Naruto? Chapter 15. Legends and myths surrounded the well-known Mount Kurama, as they did other important areas in Japan. The forest surrounding the mountain was made up of trees of all sizes, creating a dense layer of green leaves that shaped the sea of green that a bird would see from the sky, or a person from the top of the mountain would look down at the forest below, providing one of the most beautiful images a human mind could ever capture. Mount Kurama was located in Kyoto Prefecture, near the city itself. Like the mountain itself and the forest surrounding Kyoto, the city was steeped in legends and myths, which were reinforced after the almost public appearance of a demon before the city's inhabitants, both civilians and soldiers and nobles. This led to increased visits to the various temples located in the city, but also generated an immense fear of venturing into the mountain or the surrounding forests. It was said that Mount Kurama was home to the king and god of the Tengu, Sajabu, a mythical being who had taught swordsmanship to one of the legendary swordsmen and samurai of an earlier age. Until now, the only mythical presence the prefecture had ever had was the appearance of demons, the presence of hunters who protected people from these beings. Naruto knew those forests and that mountain much better than the families who had lived there for years. He had memories of the forests from his childhood, walking through them with his father and his mother's brother. He had even walked through them with his grandfather a few times before he passed away. With the sun high overhead and its rays falling on the immense forest that stretched for miles, it seemed much brighter than the sun Pilar remembered. The last moments he spent in that forest, on that mountain, weren't the best moments a person should have. He, at least, wouldn't wish them on his worst enemy, even if that enemy were a demon who probably wouldn't mind those moments. Much less when it was that demon who incited them. The swordsman stood firm in front of what looked like an old mansion, worn by time and with burnt wood, no trace of life in what seemed like decades, with dust settling on the small parts, between the splinters, on the floor, darkening the already blackened wood even further. She delicately placed her hand on the wood and closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. When she opened the door, the thick hallway of the complex welcomed her, allowing her, now open, eyes to observe what lay behind the worn wooden wall. Dead plants. Small decorations completely defeated by time, collapsed on dry, dead grass. What looked like torii gates leading from the entrance of the complex to the door of the main house were worn, shattered, with splinters and cracks running through the thickness of what had been their bodies. Naruto took the first step, walking between the collapsed torii gates. Between the dry grass blackened by the ash that had fallen on it, and that seemed part of a curse, since it hadn't gone away even though more than 10 years had passed. That land seemed to have been cursed ever since the complex was abandoned. No one has made the decision to rebuild it, to give it to someone else. It seems as if it's truly been cursed since the massacre, since he killed them. That complex within the forests of Kyoto, at the foot of Mount Kurama, belonged to a samurai clan that had worked for the imperial family for 7 generations, although currently its members had been exterminated, taking the clan to a point where it could not recover, since there was only one member left alive, and the chances of the clan being reborn thanks to him were completely minimal, thus reaching 0%. The swordsman's fingers traced the swirling symbol that adorned the left side of the house's entrance door. He could have drawn it in his memory, tracing the symbol's shape with his fingers without even looking at it. 10 years, maybe more, and you'll remain the same. The symbol of the Uzumaki samurai clan remained completely intact despite the passage of time. The paint that had given it its crimson reddish color had worn away, slowly disappearing from the wood until only a slightly chipped and worn shape remained, but it still retained the shape of the whirlpool, the vortex that shaped one of the symbols that had ceased to have any significance over time since the fall. Has someone taken possession of this area, of this abandoned complex? Naruto remembered his childhood in that complex. 13 years ago, it had been filled with people with red hair and eyes ranging from violet to indigo, all smiling and always displaying huge grins. He still remembered his cousins. All of them had red hair, and he was the only one with a completely different hair color. Usually, oddities are excluded from a clan like mine. You could say I was lucky. His mother, his grandfather's successor, had married a Ronin, a foreign swordsman with golden hair and blue eyes, traits Naruto inherited by taking the facial features of his maternal family. Normally, this was forbidden. It was surprising that his grandfather, patriarch of the clan, agreed and allowed his mother to be with an outsider. My family was amazing. Naruto lowered his arm and turned his head. From the entrance to the mansion, Mount Kurama could be seen despite the density of the forest. According to his mother, the mountain is always watching over them and protecting them, watching from afar like a mere guardian. However, that didn't stop the demon from killing them all. The smell of ash and blood was still fresh in her memory, as if it had happened that very morning. The screams, shouts, and cries of the children accompanied the smells, the memories her eyes recreated as she looked at what had once been her home. Naruto didn't feel lucky. He had been the only one to survive the massacre of his clan. The only one with the memories of all the deaths, of all the people he'd lost, of his entire family. He still remembered his cousin Karen's last words, of how blood gushed from her mouth when that demon ran her through with its sword. Yet he could never tear his eyes away from the demon's face, from the 6 eyes that stared at him with a cold, emotionless gaze at that moment. And so, he hadn't been able to forget the face of the first upper moon in the 13 years that had passed. How, then, could he consider himself lucky? All the people he'd once loved had been killed by a demon, and all he had survived was that scar. Uncle Nagato. Nagato was his mother's younger brother by a few years and captain of the guard serving the imperial family. Like the rest of the clan, he perished in the upper moon. Naruto blamed himself for Nagato's death. If his uncle hadn't appeared, he would have died alongside his mother, her head removed by the sword of the first upper moon. Hakushibo had been the first upper moon throughout Muzin's reign. It had been the first of the demon moons, the first to remain in that position for centuries, growing in power and cruelty. It was, among the moons, the most lethal when it came to eliminating its targets, always following the directives of the demon king, Muzin. That time they came looking for flowers, for the blue spider lily. Although the gardener told them there wasn't any. The secret to the demon's emergence lay in the blue spider lily, a plant a doctor used to help Muzan recover from a terminal illness, giving him the demonic powers and immortality he now possessed, creating the first demon, the one who gave life to subsequent demons with his blood. This was the story circulating around the Demon Slayer Corps headquarters, and the flower became Muzan's desire, his drug, his sole purpose in life. Those flowers don't exist here. The swordsman stopped in front of the dark cavern entrance. Behind him lay an ocean of different shades of green that, enhanced by the sunlight, created a beautiful view that Naruto enjoyed for the next few minutes as he made the decision to enter that cavern, the cave presumed to be the home of the Tengu King. The adults had kept the children away from that cave. His mother, Kushina, had prevented him from going there, just as she had prevented his cousin Karen and other children in the clan. But there was no one who could stop him now, and, guided by that impulse, he had advanced toward Mount Kurama and stood in front of that cavern, trying to take the necessary step. "This is my mother's grave, isn't it?" He had searched every corner of what had been the Uzumaki compound and even checked the clan graves. He didn't find his mother's or father's names on any of the gravestones scattered throughout the cemetery. And, from what he remembered of that incident, his mother and father had fought Kakishibo in that place, in that cavern, hidden from everyone's eyes. If Nagato had been alive and not dead because of me, they would have killed him, they would have finished off Kakishibo. Naruto clenched his fists and narrowed his eyes, forming slits that stared into the cold darkness emanating from the cave. A fleeting gust of air stirred his hair and made his ears perk up at the sound of footsteps. "It's been so long since anyone came to visit me, brat." The first thing her eyes caught was the man's ruby eyes. They were slanted like a fox's and seemed to sparkle with a certain amusement, with a hint of mockery like anyone who was amused by others. Naruto reached for the handle of his sword, a sword with a jagged blade. But he was a samurai before he was a hunter. He knew how to use such a sword most effectively. "You've grown." The leonine, bloody mane of hair made the sun pillar take several steps back. Sharp, animal-like teeth appeared as the man moved his lips in an amused smile that seemed to be accompanied by longing. "Have you come to see the graves of the tomato and the sissy?" The man wore only rag pants, leaving his torso completely bare. His left arm was adorned with a dark-colored tattoo that seemed to resemble a vine filled with thorns and roses. "It's been some time, and I've maintained them as best I could." The man's sharp face seemed to relax, giving a warm gesture. "Come, kid. Come pay respects to the dead." Chapter 16. 13 years earlier. Kyoto Prefecture. Samurai were renowned throughout Japan for their service to the various feudal lords they served. They did not necessarily have to belong to a recognized samurai clan or family to serve a feudal lord or the imperial family itself. When a feudal lord, clan leader, or the emperor himself deemed it appropriate, they could elevate any soldier or person to the rank of samurai, although this only happened on rare occasions, and the swordsman who was named samurai and served a nobleman must have had his skill with the sword and his worth as a soldier recognized. Samurai clans were much more common within feudal society, serving as one of the main sources of soldiers for the armies of the lord they served, to whom they had sworn loyalty. They were treated with respect, with fear, as if they were important figures in society, as if they were nobles. And this had degenerated into three types of samurai. Those who followed the art of the sword and protected the weak. Those who looked only after their own interests and let their arrogance guide their own decisions, taking out their frustrations on those without resources. And those who were known as Ronin, the masterless samurai, the type of person who looked out for the safety of others but was unwilling to follow the orders of a corrupt lord. This wasn't something that only affected lone samurai, those without a clan or family to serve beyond their lord. These types of samurai grew within clans like mushrooms after an autumn rain, rotting some well-known clans and leading great swordsmen down a dark path, filled with a cold evil that filled their hearts, and that no one could stop. Humans were driven by emotions, and samurai were no exception. In a world ruled by the wealthy, power lay behind names, money, and wherever people believed power resided. In the forest surrounding Mount Kurama, in Kyoto Prefecture, there was a single-family samurai clan. They were known for their blood-red hair, their maroon armor, and their temperaments, which made them resemble wild animals, like a bull running riot on the ground. But despite their temperament, they were noble, caring, and friendly people if treated with proper respect. "Do you really think he should be training at this age, father? He's just a kid." Two people sat looking at a 4-year-old boy in the garden, holding a box in just the right size for the toddler's small hands. One of the people was an older man, with dark gray hair and a thick beard that fell to his stomach as he sat. The old man's face was lined with wrinkles, and his once bright eyes were completely white, lacking the light they had once held. "My daughter. All children of the clan begin their training at a young age. Our clan has known the art of the sword for centuries and has practiced it in this manner without error since the founder. And we are not the only ones who teach children to use the sword at such a young age." The second person was a young woman, no older than 20, with blood-red hair that fell slightly past her shoulders. Her round, smooth-skinned face held purplish-gray eyes that showed concern for the infant under the guidance of the clan instructor. But my grandson will be the next clan leader, Kushina. You can't interfere with his development when he's our future. The next generation of our clan will usher in the end, or the beginning, of something great. Kushina's eyebrows fell slightly as she frowned, showing annoyance at her father's words. Nearly 10 years ago, a fortune teller had prophesied that a member of the clan's next generation would bring glory to the clan and become a legend. Her father had taken the fortune teller's words very seriously, as if they were real. And she hadn't believed the fortune teller's words. She couldn't take them as seriously as her father had. You still believe in the fortune teller's words, right? I don't think you can believe in that prophecy. That was 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, you met Minato. The old man's wide eyes moved towards his daughter, stopping any words that might have come out of her mouth. That says it all, Kushina. Minato Namikaze was Kushina's husband, a masterless samurai who appeared one day in the Uzumaki's life while she was walking through the forest surrounding Mount Kurama. As a foreigner in the clan, Kushina didn't expect her father to accept him as her husband, as the father of her grandson. Few clans turned a blind eye, and this was one of those occasions, allowing her to be with her husband and the father of her child. The prophecy had mentioned a man with blonde hair and a woman with hair like her own blood. When she met Minato, a few months after meeting the fortune teller, her father seemed overly proud and satisfied, as if his son were going to be the savior of the world, as if his little offspring were going to accomplish something truly important for history, for the world. Your union with Minato was predestined. That's why I didn't oppose your marriage, the birth of my grandson. Her wide eyes shifted toward the figure of a small boy with disheveled hair the color of the sun itself. Training my grandson in the ways of the sword is all I can do for him in my current state, my daughter. The boy will be great, with or without a prophecy. Ashina Uzumaki was considered a serious man, firm in his decisions and actions. During his youth, while he was the clan heir, he made his name using his sword serving the imperial family, nearly giving his life for the family heir. Years later, due to a powerful poison, Ashina lost his sight and became completely blind in the care of his clan. Since then, he believed in destiny, clinging to any prophecy that could bring good for his family, for his people. Nagato can take care of his training, father. If you're set on his destiny, the last word sounded irritatingly in the old clan leader's ears, it's better that my brother take charge of training him and instructing him in the clan's beliefs, in its laws. Each samurai clan had its own motto, its own laws and beliefs. And these, in turn, shaped who the clan was, who its members were, what they were capable of with their usual actions. Some clans relied solely on brute force, on their skill with the sword, and this was something members were taught from a young age, from the time they could truly understand what the words meant. My son is too immature, too childish to be an adult. Little Naruto could end up in a worse state, and just like my idiot son. Naru-chan. The small, blonde-haired infant stopped hitting the wooden dummy with the bakken and turned his head at the voice calling him. His mother and grandfather did the same. The latter grimaced at the male figure who had entered the garden, wearing a pitch-black yukata, displaying a huge smile. Leo Naglato. Little Naruto, 4 years old, was still unable to formulate sentences or words well, which had led some adults to think that the next clan leader would not be very suitable for the position, that he would be useless. With firm steps, the man took the little boy and began to spin him like a top, earning from Naruto a guttural and genuine laugh that touched his mother, who watched the scene while his father grumbled, watching as his son remained a child. Many people thought Ashina hated his son for his attitude, including Kushina, but the old man admired, respected, and loved his son. But circumstances had made him harsher on Nagato, always believing he wouldn't see the harsh side of the world, always remaining optimistic. However, Nagato had seen the harshness of the world, the cruelty, and still believed it was better to smile in the face of adverse circumstances, giving moral support to those who might be looking at his back. They get along too well. Nagato, like her sister Kushina, had long hair as red as blood itself, contrasting with her pale skin and her purple eyes that shone with happiness at the laughter of the child who spun in her hands. This son of mine will give me a heart attack one day, I swear. A giggle escaped Kushina's mouth. Father. That's how my little brother has always been. He always shines like the sun, and I prefer that for my son than a serious-faced, cold-eyed teacher who can't raise my little one in the best possible way. Kushina fondly watched her younger brother's interaction with her son. He was the only uncle her young son had left. All the others had died over time, leaving her and Nagato as Ashina's only children, and little Karen as the second granddaughter, her son's only cousin. The war had recently ended that had pitted his clan against an opposing clan. The Uchiha clan, on the other side of his territory. They had been at war for generations and had finally found some peace, a bit of respite from the rivers of blood that separated them and left hundreds of dead in its wake, both children and adults, as well as the elderly. Fine, Ashina sighed, looking directly at her grandson and youngest son. You're as stubborn as your mother, if I do say so myself. Nagato won't be the best instructor, but he won't be completely wrong either. I believe my son can look after his nephew better than an old man could. And that's just what I'll allow. Slowly, the elderly clan leader stood up, revealing his thin frame, the looseness of the clothes covering his body. But if this fails, I won't take responsibility for you having an idiot son like mine, my daughter. Ashina smiled at her father's back as she watched him walk away, into the mansion and out of sight, hiding from prying eyes. Mommy. Little Naruto's high-pitched childlike voice caught his mother's eye. Kushina smiled and reached out, taking little Naruto from her uncle's arms. It's getting bigger and heavier. Nagato placed a hand on his nephew's head, ruffling his hair as he stroked it. It reminds me of you, Nagato. You grew up too fast and learned too many things. I hope my son doesn't have to go through that. Chapter 17. Dark clouds had completely covered the sky, preventing the sun from rising even at dawn on that cold and tragic day that had struck the Uzumaki clan. All the family members and some close friends were at the family cemetery, burying the clan's patriarch. Ashina Uzumaki, the 11th clan head. It was a sad time for the first and second line relatives. Ashina had been one of the leaders who changed the clan's way of thinking. Along with his father, Ganju Uzumaki, the previous clan leader, Ashina had abolished several restrictions that had hindered the clan's growth and improvement for many centuries, leaving it at a point of decline on several occasions. Ganju and Ashina set a precedent for change and for the future leaders of the Uzumaki clan. They were two important figures within the nation's government and even more so among the leaders of the various samurai clans that served the imperial family and the country's various feudal lords. The likelihood that anyone could ever surpass them was far too far for ordinary people. And now, Ashina's sons would have to lead the clan, following in the footsteps of their father and grandfather. All eyes were going to be on the clan heads. It was something the main line of the family had assumed once they accepted Ashina's death and recovered the remains, keeping the image of the dead leader away from his grandchildren, on the orders of Ashina's own children, although this was something not everyone within the main line was happy to accept. The children were to grow up strong, ready to accept the death of anyone, whether clan or not. Clearly, Kushina and Nagato denied the children's participation in their grandfather's funeral, much less seeing the old samurai's body. Ashina hadn't died of illness or old age. When they found the old man, they saw him surrounded by his guards, all dead, and him with his own sword slashing his body, splitting it in two, the lower half lying discarded, and the upper half stuck in the thick trunk of one of the many trees that lined the road leading to the city. They split the old man in two. The clan's main leaders discussed the matter after burying the clan leader. Appearing slightly distressed, they were concerned about the scene they found when they went out in search of him. If they hadn't gone out, Ashina's body would likely have been devoured by beasts. You could speak with a little more respect. That man accepted you into this house. He's one of the most honorable men in the clan, and you couldn't possibly come close to what he is. Due to intermarriage within the clans, these clans had been affected over the generations, producing offspring with disabilities and decreasing the number of members within the clan. Therefore, surprising other clans, Ashina had been accommodating and accepting people outside the Uzumaki, just as she had done with Minato and other men and women. Madara. Ashina was a man you respected. Do so even in death. Madara Uchiha was an imposing man. His dark hair, like a mane brought from the night, covered the right half of his face in a huge lock and fell gracefully below his shoulders, with dark eyes like two immense wells. I respect him even more than you do, Madara's visible eye showed the cold anger that surrounded his answer. Being exiled from his clan, Madara was accepted by Ashina without asking for too many explanations, without judging him for his previous actions. That was why Madara had sworn to protect Ashina and her descendants. That man was half a home when I lost everything. The eldest Uchiha's eye fixed on the Uzumaki man, unintimidated when the man stared back. It was the Uzumaki who looked away, overwhelmed by the intensity of the man's gaze. Don't be mean, Madara-chan. Nagato made an appearance. As Ashina's son, and despite his usual temper, many of the clan's elders respected Nagato for his political moves that helped the clan. Surprisingly, Nagato had kept the Uzumaki economy running smoothly despite his members, managing the clan's businesses and income. HMPH. Madara crossed his arms, hiding his hands inside the wide sleeves of his kimono, closing his only visible eye and showing a calm and serious expression in his Caesar position. I'm sorry for the delay, gentlemen. Taking the position of clan head, Nagato sat in the seat his father had occupied for many years. My sister has relegated her position as acting leader to me. As everyone in this room knows, my nephew will be the next clan leader. Until such time as he is ready, I will take his place. Ashina had decreed in front of the elders that Naruto would be the next clan leader. And none of them had objected or even thought that Ashina would die prematurely, much less by a sword. The old Uzumaki leader had been the clan's best swordsman to date, and in his old age, he could still defeat the best swordsman between the ages of 15 and 30. Although in these cases, he used his experience and his techniques more than strength. The urgent matter that unites us despite my father's recent death is precisely that. The murder of Ashina and several members of the clan a few kilometers from here, to the south. It was clear to everyone in the room that Ashina had been murdered. But the culprit was far from a completely ordinary human. Dividing a man required a very determined weapon and strength, especially when the cut had been so clean, like a surgeon's. Considering that, no one there could think of a swordsman who could perform such a cut with a broadsword or an adachi. It was impossible for anyone in the current era to have such a swordsman. At least, they had no records. Are you thinking about them? Madara spoke slowly, so that everyone in the room could come to the same conclusion when he mentioned the question, emphasizing the last word of the sentence. Yes. That's exactly what I'm thinking about. The samurai of the Uzumaki clan had two roles. The first was to be part of the imperial family's guard, serving as their personal army in case of need or a war that put the family's life in real danger. The second was to belong to the demon hunters. The Demon Extermination Corps, which served the country's government, hunting down demons that appeared throughout Japan and hiding their presence from civilians, from society. That thought spread through the room. Madara's face was completely impassive, as if the presence of semi-immortal beings wasn't enough to break his mask of indifference. Like the Uchiha, Nagato continued to observe the rest of the members of the room. A demon would have the strength to do such a thing. But could an ordinary one defeat Ashina-sama? Nagato-sama? For her father to be eliminated? A demon moon would be necessary. Yes, I have that in mind. The presence of one of Musen's main followers in these lands will have to keep us alert at all times. Subtly, Nagato looked at Madara. Although the Uchiha didn't show that he was feeling the gaze of the new Uzumaki leader, he did feel the young man's eyes on him for a few seconds before moving toward the rest of those present. We must protect the flowers. The gardener is in charge of that, Miyamoto. Even you know we're no match for that particular man. The Uzumaki clan's third objective, though only members of the clan knew this, was to protect the flowers hidden within a cavern located on Mount Kurama, a mystical place that the clan members respected and kept their distance from. They also kept children completely away from the place. Perhaps he could help us with this matter, Yamamoto. Miyamoto looked at his companion before looking at Nagato. If a demon moon of Musen is in these lands, he could be the key to keeping us alive and ensuring the flowers are truly protected. Although I doubt he'll allow them to enter. Only the leader has been able to enter the cave with the gardener. He doesn't interfere in our affairs. From what my father mentioned about the gardener, he cares less about us than mere ants. As long as we don't enter the cave without his permission, there won't be any problem. The gardener was very clear about the terms of their cohabitation. No one was to enter the cave unless they had permission or were the clan leader. Throughout these years, the Uzumaki and the gardener maintained this contract and the peace between them. Neither wanted to break this stability and bring the man's wrath upon themselves. I highly doubt the moon would try to attack an entire clan with the possibility of being wiped out or leaving some survivors. We have the training necessary to fight demons. And we have the tools to do it. Nagato pointed at the katanas. They all had blades made of Nichiren steel. The steel demon hunters used to slay demons and eliminate them from the living plane, something none of them had any trouble doing. An entire army against a demon moon. We're at the level of a pillar or a quasi-pillar, Miyamoto showed arrogance in his words, in his brief smile. I think we can stay alive if we keep our eyes open. Madara looked at his own katana. Ashina had been the one to give him that sword when he moved in with the rest of the clan members, thus being considered one of them despite his different surname and appearance. We can't be arrogant, Yamamoto sighed. That could lead to your grave, Miyamoto. Hahaha. At least I'll die fighting. Miyamoto showed no fear at the thought of death. For a middle-aged man like him, the thought of death, a death brought about by battle, was the greatest pride in his eyes. I knew you'd say that. Yes. Nagato smiled. Those men were the best a clan could ask for. However, the new leader had no idea what was going to happen. Chapter 18. The smell of ash, fire, and smoke was what woke him. The grotesque scream seconds later was what made him open his eyes wide and bolt upright on the futon, feeling his chest heaving frantically and sweat running down his face, dripping down until it soaked the top of his sleeping kimono, feeling it sticky seconds after he had been fully conscious. A second scream. The sound of wood creaking and yielding under his weight, causing a loud crash loud enough to wake everyone in the complex. Those sounds finally made him get up, grabbing his katana in a sweaty hand and running to the door, feeling a blast of scorching air as he opened the shoji door that led outside. And the sight was much more daunting than the sounds coming from outside. The fire was devouring the Uzumaki clan complex, slowly devouring the houses, but maintaining a constant movement, leaving behind the sound of wails and cries that were silenced seconds later, as if someone had found the people who caused said crying. The smoke had formed a dome over the complex. It completely covered the sky, which should have been clear, obscuring the moon completely, preventing any of its slender arms from reaching them. It left everything completely dark, preventing the faint silver light from providing a full view of the dark vistas surrounding the entire complex. As the fire advanced toward him, the wails faded away. It was a nightmare. It was truly a terrifying sensation that finally dispelled the remnants of sleep that had been keeping him slightly disoriented. But that sight had been enough. Those sounds, they only gave him goosebumps and activated his survival instinct. Swallowing hard, Nagato took a deep breath. He inhaled as much as possible even though the smoke was filling the air, even though the sensation of swallowing ash filled his chest and made him cough for a few seconds. But despite that, that moment was enough for him to concentrate. To focus his eyes and run as the fire seemed to devour him, disappearing in a cloud of smoke, ash, and flames. This situation had been expected by the clan elders. Since Ashina's death a few weeks earlier, fear had spread among the clan leaders. A fear of being eradicated like other clans gripped them to a certain extent, leaving them in constant fear, with the shadow of death haunting them. And any other clan would have sunk for a lesser fear. The leaders of the Uzumaki clan had passed down strategies and plans for the clan's survival in cases where its integrity and existence were compromised. They always took into account that the demons they faced would seek out the flowers they guarded. They always took into account the enemies they had within the court and those who coveted their position. And so they spread a plan that was passed down among the clan heads from generation to generation. They were going to seek the survival of the future. The elders were to preserve the clan's future. As elders, they were to protect the younger members of the clan, those who could one day rebuild what the Uzumaki had been before their destruction. They wanted survival, to maintain the legacy. Therefore, in the event of the clan's extinction, the elders would prioritize the survival of the younger members over their own. The children and youngest members of the clan were the target of every fighter and clan elder. It didn't matter whether they were women, men, or elderly. Each of them knew that the children came before their own lives, their own existence on the plane of the living. That thought might have sounded arrogant. Ashina and the other leaders thought about how arrogant they were to do that. Perhaps the gods were punishing them and they should die. Perhaps that could be the way, but the clan leaders were willing to face the fate of the gods just for their own. It was the arrogance of a human against destiny. Because of that arrogance, Nagato intervened in his nephew's death. Because of that arrogance, Nagato removed the sword that had nearly severed the head of little Naruto Uzumaki. Because of that arrogance, Nagato Uzumaki stood between the little boy and the perpetrator of that death and destruction. With emotionless eyes, Nagato looked at the trail of corpses behind the six-eyed swordsman, whom he could identify as the first upper moon of the demon moons of Muzan because of the kanji on two of his 6 eyes. Mia. The voice left his throat as if it had been sandpaper. Without looking at the woman, Nagato wrapped his fingers around the handle of his katana and took a stance. Take Naru-chan. Now. The upper moon didn't seem to find the presence of the clan's false leader a problem. He didn't let the shout and the order disturb his own thoughts, his own mission. He remained calm as a woman took the child he had been about to murder. However, those blue eyes remained etched in the demon's mind. The demon moon cracked its neck. It had killed most of that clan. It hadn't seen the excellence they boasted about. The women and men simply begged, "Where are the flowers? Where is the blue spider lily?" The demon had gone to Mount Kurama and its forests with one mission. To obtain the flower that the Uzumaki clan was guarding and take it to Muzan so he could continue his experiments. Few knew of the existence of the blue spider lily. That flower had been the cause of the demon's existence and Muzan had become obsessed with it. However, its location had been lost with the death of the only person who had ever used it. But there was hope. The first upper moon didn't know how Muzan had obtained information about the Uzumaki's existence and their mission to keep a strange flower hidden from everyone. The odds that it was the blue spider lily were too high and obvious to ignore. I don't know what importance the flower has now. She slowly removed the top of her kimono, showing the demon her shapely torso. It's not what matters to me now. Not with a demon killing my brothers. Nagato could only regret one thing in this situation. His sister was inside the cave, performing the clan leader change ritual, which she held as a contract between the gardener and the clan head. If his sister had been with him, the demon probably wouldn't have been so arrogant. That's the only thing that interests me. Behind the demon's response lay a second motive he was trying to keep hidden. But Nagato could see how the upper moon looked at the blade of his sword, which was as black as coal, as the night itself. If that were your real and only goal, just kidnapping one of us would be enough and you wouldn't have had to reveal yourself to us. No, your goal also requires you to kill us, doesn't it? The demon's sword swung in response. The higher moon had expected to split the young man in two with that movement, surpassing his reflexes and speed. The sparks that flew when the samurai's sword collided with his own made him slightly surprised. Don't think you're going to kill me like that. Nagato lunged forward. His muscles grew slightly, defining themselves. Sword dance, he firmly gripped the handle of the katana. He guided the sword in an upward motion with the tip pointing towards the ground, wanting to split the demon in two. One sword style, he stomped down, standing firm crescent moon. Nagato held her breath. She guided the katana in a perfect motion that surprised the upper moon's reflexes and enabled it to react in time. The grotesque sound of slicing flesh overtook the sound of crackling flames, only to be drowned out seconds later by one of the sections of the complex being destroyed by the flames. You could have split me in two. Do you want to do to me what I did to that old man? Surprised, Nagato leaped back before the upper moon katana sliced his body in two with a vicious downward motion. The motion seemed to slightly shatter the ground beneath the demon's feet. It's impressive that you were able to cut me. The wound caused by the Nichiren-made katana began to close. None of your brothers have been able to inflict such a wound on me. They only cared for their offspring. And that's surprising, coming from humans. The elders perishing for the children. It's a shame I killed them. Those words were used like poison, like a hook intended to attract its prey. But they had the opposite effect of what the demon had intended. Nagato took a breath, relaxed his body, and stood firmly with the sword held tightly in his hands. If you try to attract me with those words, you won't succeed. I see. You're like him. The words reached Nagato. They were filled with resentment, suppressed anger, and enormous rancor. Stop the chatter. We have things to do. Your goal is to kill us. My goal is to keep you here. Right slash. Left slash. Sparks flew constantly. Demon and human moved through the area, surrounded by fire and smoke, their swords clashing in constant slashes that no one could have seen without their reflexes trained to that point. Nagato remained half crouched. The upper moon looked down, swinging his sword with the intention of slashing at his target. Again, Nichiren's katana got in the way, and the Uzumaki was thrown backward, breaking the demon's guard by forcing him to move his arms. Taking advantage of that moment, Nagato lunged forward. Both he and the upper moon knew this was a trap. Therefore, the demon was surprised for a second when Nagato disappeared just as he lowered his katana to cut him down. You're fast, the dark blade appeared, slicing through the upper moon's body. You pierced me from behind, leaving an afterimage my eyes couldn't capture. Is this some trick? Nagato moved his hands and thrust the katana, piercing where the demon's heart should have been. We don't use magic tricks, just skill. Yes. Taking a deep breath, the upper moon moved his hand and grabbed the blade that was impaling him, surprising the new leader of the Uzumaki clan. The black blade is linked to the users of sun breathing. And that breathing is linked to my brother. You remind me, with your presence, partially of him. But my brother could have ended this in a single second. The sound of metal cleaving forced Nagato to raise his left arm, covering his face. The demon's elbow sent the samurai back several steps, his arm going numb. And hunting down those who use those swords is a primary goal of mine. And that's made you my targets. Now, without a sword, you're not going to. Sword dance. The red-haired swordsman moved despite having a broken arm. One sword style, he raised his arm and swung the shattered katana. King Enma's sword. The upper moon saw the shattered sword come down and lowered its guard. A broken katana shouldn't have hurt him, much less killed him. But it didn't visualize the entire scene despite all the centuries under its belt. It didn't foresee the movement and the technique behind it shattering its body and sending it crashing into the rubble behind it. Shit. Nagato uttered a curse. I don't have the technique mastered, but it's enough to hurt you. If I had the full sword, you'd be dead. The clan's techniques were varied, all guiding the various sword styles within the clan. Some of them were even capable of defeating an entire contingent of soldiers. I'll have to accept that you're good. Wiping the blood from his mouth, the demon appeared as the smoke and dust cleared, revealing the deep cut on his chest. I, the first superior moon of the demon moons, Kakishibo, am going to personally kill you. Nagato slit her lips, showing a smile. Yes, that's what I expected. Chapter 19. Kakishibo had trained in the art of the sword for 400 years. As a human, he had been a skilled swordsman whom his parents admired and respected, considered a genius among his own kind, surpassed only by one person. His brother, the greatest swordsman in known history. Resentment, envy and hatred had driven Michikatsu Tsujikuni to become the demon he was now, to become Kakishibo and bury everything that had tied him to his brother, the one who started out as a demon hunter and was always above him, no matter how much he trained. That envy led Kakishibo to create his own breathing, a counter to the one his brother created and used to hunt demons. But being the opposite of him, Kakishibo used it to kill hunters, taking a special interest in those with a black sword like his brothers. The negative feelings that grew in Michikatsu's heart led him to erase his name from history, replacing it with the name of the Upper Moon, who swore his own loyalty to the one who made him the most powerful swordsman. Because of his history and past, Kakishibo couldn't understand the differences between himself and the Uzumaki leader, who was facing him with a broken Nichiren sword. It was true that the steel it was made of could kill him, but with only a sliver of steel protruding from the handle, Kakishibo saw it as impossible for the young man to carry out his death. And yet, despite the odds, Nagato stood before him. One of his arms had been rendered useless, and his sword had been broken by the demon's power, which displayed regeneration at a level superior to that of an ordinary demon. None of the wounds caused by Nagato's sword had lasted long. They had all healed, and all that remained of the wound was the blood staining the demon's clothes. Nagato was slightly surprised by Kakishibo's durability and regeneration speed. Even the demon's strength had been superior so far, shattering his sword with just a squeeze of his hand. But again, Nagato wasn't keen on taking a victory. He simply wanted to buy time so that those who could escape could actually do so. "It doesn't matter," Kakishibo said, as if reading his mind. "I'm not the only demon in the area. No one will escape." After those discouraging words, Kakishibo swung his sword and slashed directly at his opponent. Surprising the Upper Moon, Nagato dodged the slash and proceeded to attempt to stab the demon's chest a second time, something Kakishibo himself expected, considering it a futile attempt to kill himself. There were only two ways to kill a demon. One was to keep the demon fighting all night, as long as possible, until sunrise, at which point the demon would fade away and die in the sunlight. The second was to cut off the demon's head with a sword with Nichiren steel in the blade, which would cause the demon's death due to the rare steel that contained the sun within it. Nagato, as well as the rest of the clan members, knew about the ways a demon died. But that wasn't the plan. Nagato wasn't going to achieve victory and take the honor of killing the first Upper Moon. Her plan, as well as that of the rest of the adults, was to keep the children, the future of the clan, safe from the demons and away from the conflict. Also that the clan itself would be reborn at some point in the future. Before reaching Kakishibo's body, Nagato jumped back seconds before the demon's sword could touch him, leaving him several meters away from the demon moon. "Killing you is not my goal." Deflecting Kakishibo's second slash with a broken sword, Nagato drove his knee into the demon's face. The sound of a shattered nose accompanied the demon stumbling backward, blood dripping down his face. "I'm going to keep you here, surrounded by fire and destruction," the words forced Kakishibo to jump back. Two old men appeared on the scene. "Miyamoto. Yamamoto. Hey Nagato. Were you hoping to keep the prey? We ran into Miya. She mentioned your fight with a disturbing demon right in the center of the complex. Don't worry, she had Naruto-sama with her." Both Uzumaki men stood on either side of Nagato, flanking him. Yamamoto was on the left and Miyamoto was on the right. Both had their swords drawn, their eyes fixed on Kakishibo. "Then we can proceed." The rustling sound halted the conversation between the three members of the Uzumaki clan. The Upper Moon's eyes had focused solely on Nagato before shifting to the two elders. "If you're finished, I'd like to exterminate your lives." But that final sentence, Kakishibo launched himself at his three targets. His six eyes moved, and his body, following the experience of centuries, followed what the Upper Moon desired, passing between the swords of the elders and piercing Nagato's chest with his left arm, pulling out the swordsman's heart through his back. Miyamoto and Yamamoto watched in amazement as Nagato was killed in just a few seconds without being able to react, as if he were just a statue in front of the demon, making clear the difference between them. Prolonging the suffering of a few miserable humans. "I could stand by and watch your pathetic attempt to kill me. But you don't have the talent to do it. Not even the old man could do it. You bastard." Miyamoto swung his sword toward Kakishibo's bare neck as he was still piercing Nagato's body. Sparks flew as the demon's blade blocked his own seconds before he was pushed back by the Upper Moon's bloody arm, crashing to the ground. "Miyamoto, don't let emotions blind you." Yamamoto Uzumaki was, within the clan, the second strongest man and the best swordsman, surpassing by several levels the late Ashina, who was considered outside the clan to be the best swordsman in the service of the imperial family. TCH. Yamamoto's old and tired eyes moved in a second, taking stock of the situation, extracting in those seconds the entire process and the necessary data. "Be careful, Demon Moon. You must take care of the dead." Out of the corner of his three eyes on the left side of his face, Kakishibo noticed the movement of the broken sword Nagato was holding. Reacting to the movement, he covered himself with his sword and felt himself being pulled backward. "Are you still alive?" Nagato didn't reply. Blood was oozing from the hole in his chest, but the swordsman was pushing aside the searing pain and remaining on his feet, lunging again at Kakishibo as Miyamoto and Yamamoto flanked Upper Moon. He didn't seem upset or filled with doubt or fear. He deflected Nagato's arm and blocked Miyamoto's sword. Following the movement, he threw the old man at Yamamoto while simultaneously attempting to crush Nagato's head by pushing it into the ground with his left hand. For as long as Nagato could stay alive, the fight would intensify, forcing Kakishibo to move faster and use more strength. It was unknown exactly how long a person could live without a heart. Nagato had lost his in the Kakishibo attack, but by maintaining zero breathing, he stopped all blood flow and kept his organs at a minimum to stay alive. He needed the blood pumping, but during the time between him and death, he would fight by focusing solely on strength, something Miyamoto and Yamamoto could see in the substitute leader's eyes when they looked into his face, seeing those darkened eyes. A frenzy broke out. Kakishibo kept his mind focused on the three objectives. He had stopped showing any interest in Nagato, who was dying as the seconds passed. His attention was focused solely on Yamamoto, who seemed to be the danger within that trio of annoying swordsmen. Sparks to the front. Sparks to the right. Sparks to the left. Exceeding the speed a human could follow with their eyes, the four swordsmen moved through the area in an attempt to finish off their target, clashing swords and deflecting slashes that could have been fatal to some of the participants in that fight. The three Uzumakis knew perfectly well that, with a single swing of his sword, Kakishibo would defeat them. The first upper moon was above any other demon, both in strength and speed, and the centuries of experience he had as a swordsman were forcing the Uzumakis to move beyond their capabilities, to use Nagato's last moments to make a difference. But it was useless. Moon breathing first posture. Dark Moon Night Sanctuary. Taking a swordsman's stance and guiding the katana in a perfect motion that only a person with years of training could achieve, Kakishibo performed the first of his own breathing techniques, the one he created to defeat his brother, sending a powerful slash accompanied by small moons towards the three swordsmen. This caused the trio to jump and evade both the slash and the small moons, leaving them separated and vulnerable to a direct attack, which was what Kakishibo himself wanted. He flexed his legs. He fixed his 6 eyes on his target and leaped toward him, simultaneously swinging his sword in a perpendicular motion that would have cleaved a person in two. But to the demon's surprise, Nagato only slashed back, creating a clash of blades that sent sparks flying through the air and forced the demon to fall to his feet, looking suspiciously at the redeed. I'm not going to fall. Coughing up blood, feeling his body turn cold, Nagato finally fell onto his right knee, his mouth showing blood, with threads wetting his chin. To hold out for a whole minute without a heart. I must admit that's formidable and superhuman. But you can't go on. Even with your sword broken, you can no longer fight without a heart. You can't kill me. A smile appeared on Nagato's lips, to Kakishibo's bewilderment. We don't mind killing you. We're just holding you back, you idiot. Bro. Yamamoto appeared to Kakishibo's right. The demon couldn't move in time and simply raised his arm. He witnessed his own limb being severed and falling to the ground, along with a trail of dark blood. The goal is to keep you with us. Even if Nagato dies, safeguarding the future is what matters to us, demon. Kakishibo watched as Nagato's body finally shut down. He shifted his gaze to Yamamoto and Miyamoto, tightening his grip on the handle of his sword. If it is your wish, I will bring you to the most painful death. Chapter 20. The will of the Uzumaki clan was above all else. The extermination of the clan was something the elders could not conceive in their minds. The clan was above all else, and one of its members had to survive. And, following the elders' logic, that person should be next in line for the clan succession, the next leader after the deaths of Ashina and Nagato, the last two clan leaders, in order to strengthen the clan. They, the Uzumaki, were on the verge of extinction, of falling into oblivion because of that attack, because of Muzin's selfish desire to obtain the blue lily flower that they were supposedly guarding within the boundaries of Mount Kurama. Because of the elders' wishes, the servants knew what they should do. Muzin was the king of demons, the first demon to exist and to be hunted. Though his case, like that of others, was due to a strange medicine brought by a doctor who tried to save Muzin's life. After simply killing said man, the demon desired the lily as if it were a necessity to live, as if it were a drug that drove his mind to desire only two things. The lily and being able to walk among humans under the sun without any repercussions, without any danger. And he had used everything to obtain the flower. However, both were beyond his reach. Within the 12 demon moons, the second high one was self-centered and narcissistic, viewing humans as mere playthings, servants who would do whatever she wanted. Being a demon had given her the time to form her sect, to create the perfect cult with which to move among humans without fear of being found or harmed by them, though it wasn't as if an ordinary human could harm her. Auma, the second upper moon, stood before a terrified Uzumaki clanmate. The demon's sickly smile struck fear into the woman's heart, causing her to clutch the child to her chest, not wanting the young lord to see those eyes staring back at her. Mia had been in charge of young Naruto since he was born, having been about 10 years old herself when she took Kushina's tiny son into her arms. She could have run away. She could have left the boy to the mercy of the demons despite Nagato's screams. However, she couldn't do it. Naruto was her younger brother, her little ray of sunshine whom she loved. And, of course, she was going to give her life for him. Carefully, he set the boy on his feet and pushed him toward the edge of the woods. His eyes, usually bright with joy, now turned cold as he pulled a knife from the folds of his clothing and plunged it under the demon's chin, feeling blood splatter his face and hands. "Run, Naru-chan. Just go, I'll catch up with you." She and Dauma knew no life would emerge from that place. In fact, at that moment, before following the small infant, she waved her fan, and the skin on Mia's neck turned red after a second, beginning to turn damp and dark. "Oh, my." Her tongue darted out, her eyes narrowing slightly. Dauma smiled, enjoying the sight. The young maid was drowning in her own blood. "Trying to stab me to protect a child. I think it brings back memories." Her pale fingers wrapped around the faded leather handle. With a tug, the knife left the upper moon's neck. This time, there's no waterfall to save him. I'm going to get to eat him. Dauma loved suffering. He was in charge, more out of pleasure than orders, of killing all those upper moon 3 left alive. Children, women, all of them had died by his hand due to the weakness of his companion. And, of course, this generated immense pleasure within him, as if it were some kind of addiction he couldn't shake. Watching Mia fall to her knees, weeping, drowning in her tears and blood, was a sight Dauma felt with great satisfaction. That satisfaction was even increased by the mention of the child, and he saw the fear in her eyes, the feeling that she hadn't achieved what she had set out to do, and that her sacrifice was worthless. "Mia. Don't worry. Naruto-sama will be saved." Dauma felt his skin and neck being cut and regenerated at the same time. Amused, he looked at the man behind him, staring at him with those dark piercing eyes. This only made Dauma smile wider, widening his mocking, sardonic grin. The knight rescuing the lady or not? Madara Uchiha pulled the katana up and down in a fluid perfect motion, which missed by a millimeter, and the blade hit the ground, raising a cloud of dust and debris. "Don't make fun of me, demon." The wind stirred the swordsman's dark hair, swaying its thick black strands. "I'll end your life with the next few moves." "Oh my. What energy. Kejijij. But I'm not Kakushibo. I'm going to kill you with my next moves." Demon and samurai stared at each other. Dauma's mocking smile was hidden by one of his fans, which he used as a weapon. Meanwhile, Madara kept his eyes on his enemy, alert to any movement he made at any moment. "You're too observant, aren't you? Watching me every moment, every second. Should I feel flattered?" The arm moved elegantly. Frost was sent hurtling towards his enemy. As if it were nothing, Madara cut off the attack by swinging his sword, generating a shower of ice and icy dust that covered the demon's vision. Oh. Seconds ticked by. Madara moved and lunged forward, sword at the ready, his hands tightening on the katana handle. Taking advantage of the obstruction of the eye, the swordsman sliced the demon in half, splitting him at the waist, causing his legs to fall away. However, his torso remained floating. Yes. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Cutting me in two is a good option. But lasting? Oh my. That's not going to be what you're hoping for. Madara blocked Dauma's foot with his katana. The force of the blow sent the swordsman several meters backward, forcing him to plant his feet firmly on the ground and prevent him from being pushed back further, thanks to his katana being driven into the ground, leaving a massive line that slightly divided the earth. "You're not very talkative." A cold mist began to flow from the demon's mouth, in time with his own breathing. With a click, Dauma unfurled both fans with a subtle movement reminiscent of a dancer. The sardonic smile on his face never disappeared, but rather grew. "I'll have to cut your throat and see if you still have vocal cords." The icy wind moved directly toward the Uchiha as the demon's fans moved. Beneath the wind, the grass began to freeze, forming a thin layer of frost that made it shimmer, indicating that the ice was real and would harm the samurai himself. However, Madara's black eyes showed no fear, instead, they shone at an attempt on his life. Like Nagato had done earlier, the Uchiha wrapped his katana around his handle and struck Dauma's attack with a perfect motion, reflecting the icy wind in different directions, causing trees and bushes to be hit by the ice that would have harmed them. "Don't get your hopes up too high." Swinging his right fan, he deflected Madara's katana and tried to cut his neck with his left. But Madara lowered his katana and deflected the demon's weapon downward. "You're going to die here." Madara had assumed deep down in his heart that his life had ended the moment he faced Dauma, the second Haimon in Muzan's service. But there were promises, oaths he made to the boy's mother that he wasn't going to break now. Not when the Uzumaki had accepted him into their clan. Taking a deep breath, Madara sent a horizontal slash that collided with the demon's fans, generating sparks and a metallic echo. This might have thrown another man back, but this was Madara. He swung his katana and swept both arms out in a vertical slash that bisected Dama, surprising the demon. That slash had struck the weak points of his body as if they were exposed, just as if he were an ordinary human. Who are you? Dama's mind began to work, bringing up old memories from deep within him that he needed to stimulate. So he pierced his own skull and began massaging his brain, trying to recall what was pounding on the doors of his memory. Pale, with black eyes and even darker hair. The face of a woman had begun to appear in his memories of the upper second moon, like a terrible thorn he couldn't remove. That woman, of all the others he'd ever met, made the same move, cutting him in two like butter. He moved his eyes and scanned the steel of Madara's sword, smiling mockingly at the sight of the normal steel that made up the blade of that sword. Like her, you don't use hunter's steel. I can breathe easy about that. I don't use Nichiren's steel, a crack finished the sentence, because I don't want to kill you. That's not my goal. The scabbard was thrown to the side. Between samurai, that meant the swordsman was going to die. Keeping Naruto-sama alive is my goal. Dama's response to those statements died in his throat. Before the demon could speak, Madara sliced through his neck with stunning precision, severing his opponent's head and separating it from his body. Hey. Stop it. The demon's pale hands grabbed his own head. You won't even let me talk. Madara responded by stabbing Dama's body, shoving him until he crashed against a massive thick pine trunk. He didn't need the demon's taunts, feeling him spit on his own promises and goals. Gripping the handle tightly, Madara pulled and cleaved his enemy in two again, feeling the blood rush to his face. And it was like a door. Pressing his lips together, Madara sliced Dama to pieces at breakneck speed, preventing the demon from regenerating and preventing him from fighting. He couldn't kill him with Nichiren's steel. He didn't have the sword. But he could hold him there until the sun rose, watch him crumble to ash before his eyes. Hey, stop it. The grotesque sound of flesh being pierced echoed in the clearing. Slowly, Dama began to regenerate. You should let the elders talk. Moving, he threw Madara backward, a dark hole in his chest. Having to put my arm through your chest is disgustingly fun. He swung his hand, splattering blood onto the frost and grass. Now, just bury yourself in your icy hell. Dama swung both fans. A torrent of ice was launched toward the gravely wounded Madara Uchiha. Chapter 21. That was not a pleasant sight for a child to see. Just as a father should not see his son die, a son should not see his father die. As the last second slipped away in a sigh from his mother, will the brightness of life escaped from her eyes, going out like a small campfire. But that was the image that greeted the young heir of the clan when he entered the cave he should not have entered without being the leader. Seeing his mother, Kushina, with her back against a rock soaked in her blood, left him motionless in place, unmoving for several minutes. The blood could be seen dripping, drop by drop, down the surface of the rock. Skin, flesh, muscle, and bone stained the grass and left a gaping hole in the woman's stomach. She had already breathed her last seconds before seeing her only son there, so she couldn't warn him of the danger. Forming an X, two katanas remained stuck in front of the clan matriarch. Both weapons were accompanied by their respective sheaths, the steel blades dripping with the blood of the enemies who had killed Kushina. They were the hereditary swords. They were the katanas that every clan leader was expected to use when the time came. They were the inheritance of the little boy who stared at his mother's corpse, with thick tears falling from his face and wetting the grass beneath his feet. There was no sound. Silently, Naruto sobbed, standing there looking at his lifeless mother, his eyes dead, his head tilted slightly downward, his breath gone. I could wish for his death. The grass creaked under the extra weight. There was no echo, no sound. The only thing audible in the cave was Naruto's sobs, which overlapped with the footsteps of the demon who appeared behind the boy, placing the sword against his neck and lightly cutting it, leaving a red line. I was going to cut off his head. Naruto would have wished that would happen. Can you get your dirty feet out of my garden? Akishibo stopped the movement of his sword. He frowned with his 6 eyes and moved the eyepiece array directly toward the rock where the dead woman was leaning. A savage-looking man, dressed only in baggy black pants and bloody hair, stared at him with slanted eyes and a predatory smile. The first upper moon made the mistake of trying to finish his job, of reuniting his son with his mother. That was a completely fatal error. In a split second, Kakishibo felt his body hit by a projectile and was flung out of the cave until the cave wall stopped him. I told you to get your feet off my lawn, the man subtly took Naruto by the shoulders, showing delicacy. Brat. Forget this place, you're home. It's time for you to begin your journey. The blade sliced through the air. It whistled straight toward its target, sending blood splattering across the grass, but the demon's eyes widened at what they were seeing. The blade had sliced through the flesh and reached the bone, but it hadn't been able to cut through the bony form, even though it should have done so with ease. Suddenly, that bone was like a diamond. Akishibo tried to push to finish cutting the forearm. The Redeed smiled broadly and took the blade in his left hand, holding the right forearm still pierced by the sword. Before the 6 eyes of the upper moon, his own sword shattered, and hundreds of metal fragments flew out in different directions. The red-haired man withdrew the blade from his forearm, forcing Kakishibo to take several steps back. Before he could react, he struck the demon in the chest and sent him flying again, crashing into the wall. "You insolent brat," bothering the great Kurama. First a red flower appeared, then a second, and so on. As Kakishibo stood up, a huge garden of crimson flowers appeared before his incredulous eyes. "I don't know what Muzan is thinking, bastard." Kurama appeared in front of Kakishibo. Before he could react, the Redeed slammed his head against the wall with a crushing force that generated a wave of dust and wind, along with drops of blood. Kurama had shattered the demon's skull with a single movement. Killing my guards, invading my garden, and trying to kill a small child. Naruto had finally disappeared from the area. Kurama thought the child had gone through the other side of the cave. "The brat is gone. These aren't the blue lilies. I'm going to give you the torment of 1,000 hells." Present. Mount Kurama. Naruto looked at that rock after 13 years. 13 years in which he had changed completely, learning much more about himself, about his family's sword style, about his legacy. 13 years in which he worked to take revenge on those who caused the death of his loved ones. He had been through hundreds of things since he left that cave, that garden with his eyes filled with tears. His back bore the scars to prove it, and after all that torment, he was able to see the grave where his mother rested again, the swords adorning her tomb. On the right was a katana with a white handle and small gold details on the hilt, without too many flourishes. That was the Wado Ichimonji, the sword of those with an iron will, the clan's hope for future generations. On the left side, contrasting with the Wado Ichimonji, was the Enma sword, the sword that brought despair to the clan's enemies, to those who attempted to do them greater harm. Its purple hilt and black blade with purple details on the edge, making it very different from the simple design of the Wado Ichimonji and becoming eye-catching to anyone who saw it. That pair of katanas belonged to the legacy of his clan, the Uzumaki. Both swords were inherited when the leader reached the age to assume command. Until that date, the swords belonged to one of the heir's living parents, if they were not the clan leader. They are still beautiful. Naruto stroked the scar on his neck. Memories of his mother's death plagued his mind for a few seconds before he was able to shake them off, his gaze becoming as fierce as the steel of a sword. "I think this is why you came here, right?" The young son Pilar caught the object the gardener threw to him. He stared at it, incredulous at what Kurama was giving him without asking for anything in return, knowing that it was extremely expensive. Naruto shot Kurama a suspicious look. The man with wild blood-red hair laughed dryly, amused by the piercing gaze. "It's not like I'm going to charge you, kid. I'm not stupid enough to break the rules I set with your grandfather." Rules. The rules had changed everything within the clan, around the clan. Naruto lightly squeezed the object Kurama had given him and placed it in a small pouch hanging from his waist. "Things are bad if you came for them, huh? It's been 13 years since you left. 13 years since you took over as the head of the Uzumaki and became a hunter after having been a demon under his command." Using his right hand, he brushed thick strands of hair away from her face. "Muzan has moved things too far for his convenience, if I do say so myself. He's turned this circus into something unbecoming of humans and uses them at will as mere puppets. Taking control of the country's leaders, this is already looking like a chess game for the seizure of power." "Ha." The swordsman didn't respond to Kurama's mockery. He began walking slowly, step by step, toward his mother's grave. There was no headstone. It was clear the earth had been disturbed long ago. The grass was different. Its color, its length. He knelt and bent down to touch the grave with his right hand. He did so delicately, his eyes shining with tears, though none escaped their places. He wasn't there when Kurama buried his mother. He wasn't there when the funeral rites required according to the clan's beliefs were performed. He wasn't there when all his relatives were buried, forming a field full of graves. He had been absent for 13 years, far from that place and the memories. He took a deep breath. He pressed his lips together until the pink hue disappeared and stood up. Even Kurama felt a different aura surrounding the swordsman. A much heavier, much more lethal one, if you asked Iridid. "You can take them without resentment from the dead," they whisper, worried for their little one. Just as on that occasion, the red flowers began to bloom, filling the entire cave with a faint red color, and the garden is giving you its blessing, the same one everyone received to fulfill their goals. Not one of the previous leaders failed when the garden gave them its blessing. He slowly moved his hands to both katanas. He felt the leather give. Neither the steel nor the handles looked worn, as if someone had taken care of both katanas. He closed his hands and sighed in satisfaction. The Wado Ichimonji and the Enma emerged from the earth at the tug of their new owner. They glowed with a reddish hue for a few seconds, coming from the brightness of the lilies, and appeared gleaming, as if they had been forged that very day. They were light. I've kept them in the best possible condition after 13 years, boy. It's the least someone like me could do for the memory of your relatives. The blades disappeared. 2 consecutive clicks were heard in the cave. Wearing a haramaki, Naruto placed both swords on the right side of his body, resting his arm on the Wado Ichimonji. Blue eyes shone against the red of the cave. Steam escaped from the swordsman's mouth, and the aura Kurama had seen vanished, creating a chilling sensation of death. It was what he saw in his dreams. I'm so proud, Kurama pushed Naruto toward the exit. This Oslo started walking. Just make them cry, pup. Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.